In a world where brilliance is routinely ignored and mediocrity celebrated, one man's refusal to compromise his integrity sparked a chain of events that would expose the darkest truths about corporate America and revealed that the anonymous voice he'd trusted for months belonged to someone who'd been watching him all along. This is the story of Liam Brooks, a single father of three whose quiet strength became his greatest weapon. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The email arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Liam Brooks sat in his home office, the blue glow of his monitor casting shadows across a face that hadn't seen proper sleep in weeks. Around him, the house was finally quiet. Emma's breathing monitor hummed from down the hall, Jake's retainer case sat on the bathroom counter where he'd forgotten it again, and Sophie had left her math homework scattered across the kitchen table. 3 kids, 3 different rhythms, 3 sets of needs that never quite aligned. He should have been in bed, should have been doing a lot of things differently, probably. But the Meridian file wouldn't close itself, and Henderson's presentation to the board was in 6 hours, and someone had to actually make sure the numbers added up before they committed $40 million to what was essentially financial theater. The email was from Astra. Your analysis on the European hedge position was solid, but you're thinking too conservatively. The risk isn't in the exposure, it's in assuming the existing models account for political volatility. They don't. Run it again with a 15% disruption coefficient and see what happens. Liam leaned back, the office chair creaking under him. 6 months ago, he'd posted a technical question on a private financial forum, something about derivative structures that most people wouldn't touch with borrowed expertise. Astra had responded within an hour, not with simple agreement or the kind of corporate speak that usually passed for insight, but with a challenge that made him rethink his entire approach. They'd been talking ever since. Anonymous handles, pure ideas, no credentials or titles, or the usual hierarchy that poisoned every professional conversation he'd had in the last decade. Just 2 people who actually understood what they were looking at. He opened the Meridian file again, ran the numbers with Astra's coefficient. The model fell apart in his hands. Jesus, he muttered. If Astra was right, and Astra was usually right, Henderson was about to walk into that boardroom and recommend a strategy that would lose the firm somewhere between $12 and $18 million in the first quarter alone. The kind of loss that ended careers. The kind that made the business journals and triggered federal inquiries. Liam checked the time. 12:03 a.m. Henderson wouldn't answer his phone, wouldn't check email, wouldn't give a damn what some junior analyst had to say about numbers he'd already approved. The presentation was locked. The decision was made. He typed out a response to Astra. You just saved Henderson from himself. Again. Not that he'll ever know it. The reply came back almost immediately. That's the job, isn't it? Making other people look smart. Liam smiled despite himself. Closed his laptop, went to check on the kids. Emma was 7, the youngest, and she slept like she was afraid of missing something. One eye barely closed, stuffed rabbit clutched in a chokehold. He adjusted her blanket, checked the monitor battery, moved the water cup closer to the bed. Jake was 10, sprawled diagonal across his mattress with one foot hanging off the edge and his mouth open. His report on the solar system was due Friday. They hadn't started it yet. Another thing on the list. Sophie was 13 and had recently decided that closed doors were a human right. He knocked softly, heard nothing, eased it open just enough to confirm she was breathing. Headphones on, phone face down, probably texting people who actually understood what it was like to be her. Back in his own room, Liam looked at the bed like it was a theoretical concept. 4 hours until the alarm. Maybe 5 if he skipped the shower. He lay down fully dressed, stared at the ceiling, and thought about the presentation he'd just fixed that would never have his name on it. This was the pattern. This was the life. He closed his eyes and tried to remember when it had started feeling normal. Morning arrived with the efficiency of a tactical assault. Emma couldn't find her left shoe. Jake announced he needed poster board for a project due today. A project he'd known about for 2 weeks. A project that somehow became Liam's emergency at 6:40 a.m. Sophie declared that breakfast was unnecessary and controlling before eating 3 granola bars in rapid succession. Liam packed lunches, signed permission slips, searched for the shoe, found it in the bathroom sink for reasons that defied logical explanation. drove through morning traffic with the kind of precision that came from repetition, dropped all three kids at their respective schools, and arrived at Helix Capital with 11 minutes to spare before Henderson's presentation. The office was already performing its usual theater of productivity, people moving with purpose, voices projecting confidence, everyone acting like they understood what they were doing. Liam walked past his cubicle, past the departmental clusters, past the glass-walled offices where actual decisions supposedly happened, and headed straight for Henderson's floor. Patricia from compliance stopped him at the elevator. "You're not on the list for the boardroom," she said. Not unkindly, just factually, like she was reading a weather report. "I need 2 minutes with Henderson before he goes in." "He's already in." "Then I need—" "Liam." She looked at him the way adults look at children who haven't learned how the world works yet. "You rewrote the models last night, didn't you?" He didn't answer. "I saw the file timestamps. You think he doesn't know you do this? He knows. They all know. They just don't care." She pushed the elevator button for him, sending it back down. "Go to your desk. Do your job. Let them do theirs." He went to his desk. The morning stretched out in the particular kind of slow torture that came from knowing something bad was happening in real time while being completely powerless to stop it. Liam tried to focus on other projects, the Singapore portfolio, the tech sector rebalance, the cryptocurrency exposure analysis that everyone was suddenly interested in, despite none of them understanding the underlying mechanics. At 10:15, his phone buzzed. A message from Astra. "How'd the presentation go?" "Don't know. Wasn't invited." "But you fixed it." "I fixed it." Whether they use the fix is a different question. You need to start taking credit for your work. Liam stared at that message for a long time. Taking credit required visibility. Visibility required political capital. Political capital required the kind of schmoozing and networking and strategic relationship building that he'd never been good at and had zero time for anyway. "Easier said than done," he typed back. "Most important things are." At 11:30, Henderson sent out a department-wide email announcing that the Meridian deal had been approved with minor optimizations to the risk model. No names mentioned, no acknowledgement of the $18 million that hadn't been lost because someone had caught the problem at midnight. Liam deleted the email and went back to work. Lunch was a protein bar eaten at his desk while reviewing the morning's market movements. He was deep into an analysis of emerging market currencies when Marcus Chen dropped into the neighboring cubicle. "You going to the gala?" Marcus asked. Liam looked up. Marcus was younger, sharper dressed, the kind of analyst who understood that finance was 10% math and 90% performance art. They'd started the same year. Marcus was already 2 promotions ahead. "What gala?" "The Innovator Summit thing. Friday night. Helix is a platinum sponsor, which means they're dragging a bunch of us along to look impressive." Marcus grinned. "Open bar, decent food, chance to pretend we're important for a few hours. You should come." "I don't do those things." "Yeah, I've noticed. That's kind of your whole problem, man." Marcus leaned against the cubicle wall. "You're brilliant. Everyone knows it. But you're invisible. You think Henderson got where he is because he's good at math? He got there because he shows up. He shakes hands. He makes people remember his name." "I have 3 kids at home." "Get a babysitter. Network a little. Let people see that you exist." Marcus checked his phone. "Look, I'm not saying you have to become a politician, but you're never going to get recognized for your work if nobody knows who you are. That's just reality." He left before Liam could formulate a response. The afternoon continued its slow march toward evening. Market close brought the usual flurry of last-minute adjustments and portfolio rebalancing. Liam worked through it methodically, double-checking calculations that other people would claim credit for, fixing problems that would never be attributed to him. At 5:45, most of the office began its migration toward the exits. Liam stayed. He always stayed. There was a particular kind of productivity that came after everyone else left. No interruptions, no performance, just work. He pulled up the Singapore portfolio. Something about the allocation wasn't sitting right. The numbers were technically sound, but there was a pattern in the volatility that suggested an underlying correlation nobody had accounted for. He started building a new model. His phone buzzed. "Sophie." Jake forgot his inhaler. Again. Liam closed his eyes, breathed, opened them. "I'll be home in 30 minutes, he typed back. He needs it now. He's wheezing. He saved his work, shut down the computer, grabbed his coat and headed for the parking garage, moving fast enough that he almost collided with Ellen Rodriguez from Investor Relations. "Liam, just the person I needed to see." She fell into step beside him, heels clicking on the polished floor. "You're coming to the Summit Gala, right? I wasn't planning on it. You should reconsider. There are going to be some very important people there, the kind who might actually appreciate what you do here." She handed him an embossed invitation. "Plus, it's formal. When's the last time you got dressed up and did something that wasn't work or parenting?" He couldn't remember. "Think about it," Ellen said. "You might surprise yourself." Liam made it home in 23 minutes, found Jake's inhaler in the bathroom cabinet where it had been the whole time, and spent the next 2 hours managing homework, dinner, and the complex diplomatic negotiations required to get 3 children into bed at reasonable hours. By the time the house was quiet again, he was too tired to work, too wired to sleep. He sat in his office and opened his laptop, checked the forum. Astra had posted again, "Question for you. If you could redesign your career from scratch, no constraints, no obligations, what would you actually want to do?" Liam stared at the question. It felt dangerous somehow, like admitting that the current situation wasn't enough, wasn't right, wasn't sustainable. "I'd want to do work that matters," he typed. "With people who value truth over perception. I'd want my kids to be proud of what I do, and I'd want to stop feeling like I'm invisible." He hit send before he could reconsider. The response came back within minutes. "You're not invisible. You're just looking in the wrong direction." Thursday passed in a blur of meetings he wasn't invited to and projects that somehow became his responsibility, despite having no authority to actually implement anything. Liam fixed a critical error in the European portfolio before anyone noticed it existed, prevented a compliance violation in the tech sector rebalance, identified a dangerous concentration in the cryptocurrency exposure that would have triggered regulatory scrutiny. Nobody thanked him. Nobody noticed. By Friday afternoon, he'd convinced himself that skipping the gala was the smart move. He had Jake's solar system project to finish, Emma's school play next week to prepare for, Sophie's increasingly complicated social life to monitor. He had work to do. Real work. The kind that actually mattered. But then Sophie came home from school and saw the invitation on the kitchen counter. "What's this?" she asked. "Nothing. Work thing." "A fancy work thing?" She picked it up, reading. "The Innovators Summit Gala. Dad, this sounds important." "It's just networking. Not really my scene." Sophie looked at him with the particular intensity that 13-year-old girls had perfected over millennia. "When's the last time you did something for yourself?" "I do things for myself." "No, you do things for us, which is great. But you're allowed to have a life too, you know." She put the invitation back down. "You should go. Jake and I can watch Emma. We'll be fine." "Sophie, we'll be fine," she repeated, with the kind of certainty that didn't leave room for argument. "Go. Wear the suit that doesn't have coffee stains. Try to have fun." So on Friday evening, Liam Brooks did something he almost never did. He put on his good suit, the charcoal one he'd worn to his wife's funeral 3 years ago and hadn't touched since. He shaved. He checked his hair in the mirror and realized he needed a haircut, but it was too late for that now. Jake made him take a photo. Emma told him he looked fancy like a prince. Sophie adjusted his tie and told him not to come home before midnight. "That's way too late," Liam said. "I'm making a point. Have fun. Talk to people. Stop being so serious all the time." He arrived at the Grand Regency Hotel at 7:45, 15 minutes after the official start time, but early enough that the crowd was still forming. The ballroom was exactly what he'd expected. Chandeliers and ice sculptures and waiters circulating with champagne flutes on silver trays. People clustered in strategic groups, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, trading business cards like currency. Liam got a drink he didn't want and tried to look purposeful while having absolutely no purpose. He spotted Henderson near the bar, holding court with a group of senior partners. Marcus was there too, working the room with the ease of someone who'd been born knowing how this game was played. Ellen Rodriguez was deep in conversation with a woman in a red dress who radiated the kind of power that came with genuine money. Liam stayed on the periphery, watched, felt like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. "Liam Brooks?" He turned. Trevor Walsh from Derivatives, a guy who'd started at Helix 2 years after him and was already a VP. They'd worked on a project together once. Trevor had taken full credit for work Liam had done. It hadn't been personal, just business. "Trevor, how are you?" "Good, good. Surprised to see you here. This isn't usually your kind of thing." "Trying something different." "Well, good for you, man. Really. You should do this more often." Trevor clapped him on the shoulder with the kind of enthusiasm that felt rehearsed. "Listen, I've been meaning to ask, you're still doing that quantitative analysis stuff, right? I might have a project coming up that could use your particular skill set." Translation: I have work I don't want to do and need someone to do it for me. "Send me the details," Liam said. Will do. Trevor was already looking past him, scanning for more important conversations. "You should go mingle, make some connections. That's what these things are for, right?" He disappeared into the crowd. Liam checked his phone. No messages. The kids were fine. He had no excuse to leave. He drifted toward the edge of the room, found a spot near the windows that offered a good view of the city and a reasonable escape from forced social interaction. He watched the party unfold like a stage production he wasn't part of. People playing roles, speaking lines, hitting marks. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." The voice came from his left. Liam turned and saw a woman in a black dress that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage. She was younger than most of the crowd, maybe late 20s, with the kind of direct gaze that suggested she was used to people paying attention when she spoke. "That obvious?" Liam asked. "Only to people who feel the same way." She extended her hand. "Elena." "Liam." They shook. Her grip was firm, professional, the kind that came from shaking a lot of hands. "So what brings you to this particular circle of hell?" Elena asked. "Peer pressure, mostly. You?" "Obligation. My company's being honored for something or other. Innovation in technology investment. Disruptive thinking, the usual buzzwords." She took a sip of champagne. "I'm supposed to be networking, but everyone here wants to talk about money, and I'm very tired of talking about money." "What would you rather talk about? Anything else?" She looked at him with genuine curiosity. "What do you do, Liam?" "Financial analysis, Helix Capital." "And what does that actually mean?" Most people didn't ask follow-up questions. They just nodded and moved on to more interesting topics. Liam found himself explaining the kind of work he did, not the corporate speak version, but the actual mechanics of it, the patterns he looked for, the problems he solved, the satisfaction of finding the one number in 10,000 that didn't add up. Elena listened. Actually listened. "That sounds impossibly precise," she said. "How do you know when you're right?" "You don't. Not immediately. But you develop instincts. You start to see patterns that other people miss. And eventually you learn to trust your analysis even when everyone else thinks you're wrong. That must be lonely. Sometimes. But you do it anyway. Someone has to." Elena smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd seen all night. "I like that answer. Most people would have said they do it for the challenge, or the money, or some other acceptable lie. But you just said someone has to. Like it's a responsibility. Isn't it? Maybe, but most people don't think that way anymore. They think about career advancement and market positioning and personal brand." She said the last two words like they tasted bad. "You're different." Before Liam could figure out how to respond to that, someone called Elena's name from across the room. She glanced over, made brief eye contact with whoever was summoning her, and turned back to Liam. "I have to go do the obligatory speech thing, but I want to continue this conversation." She pulled out a business card, actual paper, heavy stock, minimalist design. Just a name and an email address. Elena Voss. Liam looked at the card, looked at her, started to understand who he'd been talking to for the last 10 minutes. Elena Voss, CEO of Voss Innovations. The youngest self-made billionaire on the Forbes list. The woman who'd built a technology investment empire before she was 30. The person half the room was here to impress. "You didn't mention what you did," he said. "You didn't ask. Most people ask immediately. They want to know if I'm worth their time." She met his eyes. "You just talk to me like a person. I appreciate that more than you know." She started to walk away, then stopped. "Oh, and Liam, that analysis you did on the Meridian deal, the one that saved your company $18 million? That was brilliant work. You should make sure the right people know you did it. She was gone before he could ask how she knew about that. Liam stood by the window holding a business card that felt like it was burning his fingers, trying to process what had just happened. Around him, the party continued, but everything felt different now, like a door had opened that he hadn't known existed. His phone buzzed. A message from Astra. "How's the gala?" He typed back, stranger than expected. "I think I just had a conversation with Elena Voss." "The Elena Voss?" "Yeah." "What did you talk about?" "Work, mostly." "She knew about the meridian analysis. I have no idea how." There was a long pause before Astra responded. "Maybe someone's been paying attention after all." The weekend passed in the usual chaos of children and chores and the relentless logistics of single parenthood. But Liam's mind kept returning to Friday night, to the conversation with Elena Voss, to the way she'd looked at him like he was someone worth talking to. On Monday morning, he arrived at Helix to find his desk surrounded by colleagues who'd previously shown zero interest in his existence. "Brooks, heard you made quite an impression Friday night," said Derek from institutional sales. "That true you spent half an hour talking to Elena Voss?" asked Jennifer from portfolio management. "What did you talk about? Is she as intense in person as she seems in interviews? Did she mention Helix?" Liam tried to get to his computer. The crowd didn't disperse. "It was just a conversation," he said. "Just a conversation? Man, do you have any idea who that woman is?" Derek laughed. "Half the firms in the city have been trying to get a meeting with her for months. She doesn't take meetings. She doesn't return calls. And she spent half an hour talking to you?" "It wasn't half an hour." "Close enough. People noticed Brooks. Important people." The crowd eventually thinned, but the attention didn't. Throughout the day, people kept stopping by his desk, asking questions, making small talk, acting like they'd been friends all along. At 2:30, Henderson called him into his office. "Liam, sit down." Henderson gestured to one of the leather chairs that faced his desk. "I hear you made some interesting connections Friday night." "I talked to a few people." "You talked to Elena Voss, one of the most influential investors in the technology sector. A woman who could bring Helix the kind of high-profile deals that transform a firm." Henderson leaned forward. "I'm going to be direct with you. We want to pursue a partnership with Voss Innovations, and you're our connection." "I'm not a connection. I had one conversation. One conversation more than anyone else has managed in months. Look, Liam, I know you prefer to stay behind the scenes. I respect that. But this is an opportunity. For you, for the firm, for everyone." Henderson opened a folder on his desk. "We're prepared to make you a senior analyst. Significant salary increase. Better office. Access to the kinds of projects you've been doing anyway, but with actual recognition." Liam stared at him. "In exchange for what?" "In exchange for maintaining your relationship with Ms. Voss. Keep talking to her. Build trust. When the time is right, facilitate an introduction between her firm and ours." Henderson smiled. "You'd be doing what you do best. Analysis, strategy, solving problems. Just with a slightly more public-facing component. You want me to use a personal connection to generate business opportunities. I want you to leverage a professional relationship in a mutually beneficial direction. That's how this industry works, Liam. You know that." He did know that. Had watched it happen 1,000 times. Had benefited from it, indirectly, when other people did it. But being asked to do it himself felt different. Felt wrong in a way he couldn't quite articulate. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course. But don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait around." Henderson stood up, signaling the meeting was over. "You've been invisible for a long time, Liam. That was your choice. But now people see you. What you do with that visibility is up to you." Liam went back to his desk, tried to focus on work. Couldn't. At lunch, he went to the coffee shop 3 blocks away that he always went to because nobody from Helix ever went there. He ordered his usual, sat in his usual corner, pulled out his phone, and opened the form. "Tell me something," he typed to Astra. "If someone offered you everything you wanted professionally, but the cost was compromising a personal relationship, would you do it?" The response came back quickly. "Depends on the relationship, and what everything you wanted actually means. Is this about the Voss situation? Henderson wants me to use my connection with her to facilitate a partnership. They're offering me a promotion, money, recognition, everything I've supposedly been missing, but it feels like I'd be using her. and I don't want to be that person. Then don't be. The world has enough people willing to compromise their integrity for advancement. It doesn't need one more. Liam read that message 3 times. Easy for you to say. You're not raising 3 kids on an analyst's salary. No, I'm not. But I know what it's like to be used, to be seen as valuable only for what you can provide, not who you are. And I know that the people who refuse to play that game are the ones worth knowing, even if it costs them everything. Especially then. He closed his phone, drank his coffee, thought about Elena Voss asking him what he'd rather talk about besides money. Thought about Sophie telling him he was allowed to have a life. Thought about the person he wanted his kids to see when they looked at him. When he got back to the office, he found Ellen Rodriguez waiting by his desk. "Liam, quick word." She didn't wait for an answer, just headed toward one of the small conference rooms. He followed. "I'm going to be honest with you," Ellen said once the door was closed. "The partners are very excited about your connection to Elena Voss. Very excited. They see this as a game-changing opportunity, and they're putting a lot of pressure on me to make sure you understand how important this is." Henderson already talked to me. I'm sure he did. But I'm not here to sell you on anything. I'm here to give you some advice, person to person. She sat down, gestured for him to do the same. You're good at what you do. Exceptional, actually. But this firm doesn't reward exceptional work. It rewards visibility and results. The Voss connection gives you both. If you play this right, you could actually build the kind of career you deserve. And if I don't want to play it at all? Ellen looked at him for a long moment. Then you stay exactly where you are, doing brilliant work nobody sees, fixing problems nobody thanks you for, being invisible until you're not useful anymore. She stood up. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I am saying it's a choice. Make it consciously. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Liam sat in his office and looked at Elena Voss's business card. He'd been carrying it around for 3 days, taking it out periodically like a talisman. He could email her, follow up on their conversation, see if she actually meant it when she said she wanted to talk more. And maybe that would lead to something professional. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe it didn't matter. Or he could do nothing, let it fade, go back to being invisible. His phone buzzed. Sophie texting from her room. Did you decide about the work thing? What work thing? Whatever's been making you stare at your computer for 3 hours without actually doing anything. I can hear you thinking from here. Liam smiled despite himself. How'd you get so smart? Good genes. Also, you're not as subtle as you think you are. What's the decision? Whether to do something that could be really good for my career but might compromise my principles. That's easy. Don't compromise your principles. You taught me that. Sometimes it's more complicated than that. Not really. Either something's right or it isn't. You know which this is. You're just scared to admit it. 13 years old and already wiser than most adults he knew. When did you get so grown up? He typed. Someone had to. You're terrible at taking your own advice. He put down the phone. Looked at the business card again. Made his decision. He opened his email and started typing. Dear Ms. Voss, I wanted to thank you for the conversation Friday night. It was refreshing to talk to someone who was interested in ideas rather than optics. I don't usually attend those kinds of events, but I'm glad I went. I'm writing to be direct about something. My firm is very interested in pursuing a business relationship with Voss Innovations, and they're under the impression that I can facilitate that connection. I want you to know that while I'm happy to continue our conversation, I'm not willing to use a personal interaction as leverage for professional gain. If that means this is where our conversation ends, I understand. But I thought you deserved honesty. If you're ever interested in talking about financial models or analysis or anything that doesn't involve business development, I'd enjoy that. No agenda, just conversation. Best regards, Liam Brooks. He hit send before he could reconsider, closed his laptop, went to bed, didn't sleep. At 6:47 a.m., his phone buzzed with a new email. From Elena Voss. Subject line, Honesty. Mr. Brooks, I've been in business long enough to recognize when someone is trying to manipulate me. It happens constantly. What you just sent is the opposite of that, and I respect it more than you know. I'm not interested in doing business with Helix Capital. I've looked at their practices, their culture, and their values, and none of them align with mine. But I am interested in continuing to talk to you, because I think you're the kind of person who sees things clearly and isn't afraid to tell the truth, even when it costs you something. I have a question for you. What would you build if you weren't constrained by your current environment? Not hypothetically. Actually, if you could design your ideal professional situation from scratch, what would it look like? Think about it. No rush. Elena Liam read the email twice, 3 times, looked at the time, had to get the kids up for school, but he couldn't stop thinking about her question. What would he build? He made breakfast, packed lunches, drove the morning route, went through all the familiar motions while his mind was somewhere else entirely. By the time he got to Helix, he'd started to formulate an answer. The answer came to him during Jake's soccer practice on Wednesday afternoon. Liam sat on the metal bleachers, watching his son chase a ball across muddy grass with the kind of determination that had no relationship to actual skill. Jake wasn't good at soccer. He was enthusiastic, which was different. Every week he asked if he could quit. Every week Liam told him he had to finish what he started. Every week they both pretended this made sense. What would he build if he wasn't constrained? The question had been sitting in his head for 3 days, reshaping itself every time he looked at it. At first he thought about systems, better risk models, more accurate predictive algorithms, the kind of analytical framework that could actually prevent disasters instead of just documenting them after the fact. But that wasn't really an answer. That was just describing his current job with better tools. What he actually wanted was simpler and more complicated at the same time. He wanted to work with people who gave a damn about getting it right, not getting credit, not getting promoted, not getting their names in the business journals, just getting it right, finding the truth in the numbers and acting on it, even when the truth was inconvenient. He'd worked with exactly one person like that in his entire career, an analyst named Rebecca Chen, who'd lasted 8 months at Helix before taking a position at a nonprofit that paid half as much and gave her actual satisfaction. They'd grabbed coffee once after she left. She'd looked healthier, lighter, like she'd been holding her breath for years and finally remembered how to exhale. "You should get out," she'd told him, "before this place convinces you that invisible competence is the same thing as having a life." He hadn't listened, had 3 kids and a mortgage and responsibilities that didn't care about job satisfaction, but he'd thought about her advice more than once. His phone buzzed. A message from Astra. "Have you answered her question yet?" "Working on it." "You have thoughts?" "I think you already know the answer. You're just afraid of what it means." "That's not helpful. Truth rarely is." "But here's another question. What are you more afraid of? Failing at something that matters, or succeeding at something that doesn't?" Liam stared at that message for a long time. On the field, Jake collided with another kid, bounced off, kept running. The coach yelled something encouraging. Parents applauded politely. He typed back, "I'd build something small. Not a firm exactly, more like a team. 5 or 6 people who actually understand what they're looking at. We'd work on projects that need real analysis, not just performance. And we'd be honest about what the numbers say, even when clients don't want to hear it." Why small? Because the bigger something gets, the more it becomes about protecting itself instead of doing the work. I've seen it happen. Good companies that turn into bureaucracies because growth becomes the only metric that matters. And you think Elena Voss would be interested in something like that? I have no idea. But you asked what I'd build, not what I think is marketable. The response came back almost immediately. "Good, build that." Practice ended. Jake ran over, covered in mud and sweat, and something that might have been grass stains or might have been something worse. "Did you see that goal?" he asked. "Which goal?" "The one I almost scored. I was so close." Jake was practically vibrating with excitement about something that hadn't actually happened. "Coach said I'm getting better. He said if I keep practicing, I might make starting lineup next season." Liam looked at his son's face, flushed with hope that had no basis in observable reality. Thought about crushing that hope with facts. Decided not to. "That's great, buddy. I'm proud of you. Can we get ice cream? It's 40 degrees outside." "Ice cream doesn't have a temperature requirement, Dad. That's not how ice cream works." They got ice cream. That night, after the kids were asleep and the house had settled into its usual quiet, Liam opened his laptop and started writing a response to Elena. He deleted it, started again, deleted that too. The problem was that answering honestly meant admitting things he'd been avoiding for years, that he was stuck, that he'd traded possibility for security so long ago he'd forgotten what possibility felt like, that he was raising his kids to finish what they started, but had never actually started anything himself that mattered. He tried a third time. Elena, I've been thinking about your question. If I could build something from scratch, I'd create a small analytical team focused on truth over optics. We'd take on complex financial problems that require actual insight, not just repackaging existing models to make clients feel smart. We'd be honest about risk, even when that honesty costs us business. And we'd prioritize getting it right over getting credit. I know that probably sounds naive. Most people would say that kind of purity doesn't survive contact with real business pressure. They're probably right. But you asked what I'd build, not what would succeed. The real answer is simpler. I'd build something I could be proud of, something my kids could understand when they ask what I do all day. Right now, when they ask, I tell them I fix other people's mistakes. That's accurate. But it's not what I want the answer to be. Liam, he sent it before doubt could stop him. Went to bed, didn't sleep well. Thursday morning brought him face to face with the consequences of honesty he'd been expecting since Monday. Henderson called him into his office at 9:15, which meant this conversation had been scheduled, which meant it was going to be worse than a casual check-in. Liam, sit. Henderson didn't look up from his computer. I heard you emailed Elena Voss. I did, without running it past investor relations, without coordinating with business development, without any consideration for the strategic implications. Now Henderson looked up. What exactly did you say to her? I thanked her for the conversation, and I told her I wouldn't use a personal connection to facilitate business opportunities. The silence that followed was the kind that occurred when someone was mentally calculating exactly how angry to be. You told one of the most valuable potential partners in the city that you wouldn't help facilitate a relationship with this firm. I told her I wouldn't use our conversation as leverage. That's different. No, Liam, it's really not. Henderson stood up, walked to the window. Do you have any idea what you've done? We've been trying to get a meeting with Voss Innovations for 8 months. You had direct access, and you poisoned the well. I was honest with her. Honesty is a luxury people in your position can't afford. You're an analyst, a good one, but you're not a relationship manager, and you're certainly not in a position to make strategic decisions about partnerships. Henderson turned back to face him. I'm moving you off client-facing projects. You'll focus on internal analysis. No external communications without approval. And the promotion we discussed is off the table. Liam nodded. He'd expected this. Maybe not this fast, but eventually. Understood. Do you understand what you just gave up? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you sabotaged your own career out of some misguided sense of principle. Maybe, but I can live with that. Henderson shook his head. You have 3 kids, Liam. A mortgage, responsibilities. You can't afford principles. I can't afford not to have them. He left before Henderson could respond. Walked back to his desk through an office that suddenly felt hostile. People who'd been friendly 3 days ago now avoided eye contact. The attention he'd briefly received had curdled into something else. Judgment, maybe. Or just confirmation that he'd never understood how things worked. Marcus caught him at the elevator bank around lunch. Man, what did you do? Henderson's furious. Ellen's in damage control mode. Everyone's saying you blew the Voss deal. I didn't blow anything. I just refused to manipulate someone. That's literally the job, Liam. Building relationships, creating opportunities, leveraging connections. That's how business works. Then maybe I'm in the wrong business. Marcus looked at him like he'd announced plans to join a cult. You can't be serious. You're going to throw away your career because you're too pure to do basic networking? It wasn't basic networking. They wanted me to use a personal conversation as a business tool. So what? People do that every day. I do that every day. That's how I made VP before 30. That's how everyone who matters gets ahead. Marcus lowered his voice. Look, I get it. You have principles. That's admirable. But principles don't pay your kids' tuition. They don't keep the lights on. At some point, you have to be practical. At some point, Liam said, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. He took the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator, went to the coffee shop 3 blocks away, ordered his usual, sat in his usual corner and tried to figure out if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life or the first honest decision in years. His phone buzzed. Email from Elena Voss. Liam, that's the best answer I've received to that question, and I've asked it more times than you'd think. Most people tell me what they think I want to hear, or they describe something so grand and ambitious that it's clearly performance rather than actual vision. You told me something simple and true. I want to talk to you about it, not as a business proposition, not as a networking opportunity, just as a conversation between two people who think similar things matter. Are you free for coffee Saturday morning? There's a place in Lincoln Park that makes terrible coffee but has good light and nobody bothers me there. Say 9 a.m. Elena Liam read it twice, checked the date. Saturday was 2 days away. Sophie had a friend coming over. Jake had a birthday party in the afternoon. Emma had requested pancakes shaped like animals, which was a 45-minute project minimum. But 9 a.m. was doable. He typed back, "I'll be there." Spent the rest of Thursday in a strange, suspended state, going through the motions of work that felt increasingly hollow. He reviewed portfolio allocations that someone else would present, fixed errors in models that would carry someone else's name, did the work he was good at while knowing it didn't matter anymore. Friday was worse. Henderson reassigned 3 of his ongoing projects to other analysts. Ellen stopped by his desk to collect files for archival purposes, which was corporate speak for removing his access. By the end of the day, Liam's responsibilities had been quietly reduced to the kind of maintenance work they gave to analysts they were planning to manage out. He should have been angry, should have been worried about his job security, his future, his ability to provide for 3 kids who needed things like food and housing and orthodontia. Instead, he felt relieved, like he'd been holding his breath for years and finally remembered how to exhale. He left at 5:30, which was early for him, but apparently late enough that most of the office had already cleared out. The drive home was the usual stop-and-go mess of Friday traffic. He picked up pizza because he didn't have the energy to cook. Got home to find Sophie helping Emma with homework, while Jake built something elaborate out of Legos that would definitely get stepped on later. "You're home early," Sophie said. Not accusatory, just observant. "Slow day. You're a terrible liar. I'm working on it." They ate pizza. Watched a movie that Emma chose, which meant animated animals and a lesson about friendship. Jake fell asleep halfway through. Sophie scrolled through her phone with the volume off, pretending not to pay attention while actually absorbing every detail. Later, after everyone else was in bed, Sophie came into the kitchen where Liam was cleaning up. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Did something happen at work?" He looked at his daughter. 13 years old, too smart for her own good, old enough to deserve honesty, young enough that he wanted to protect her from it. "I made a decision that wasn't popular. It might make things harder for a while." "Harder how?" "I don't know yet, but I wanted you to know in case things change." Sophie was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, "Was it the right decision?" "I think so." "Then it'll be okay." She said it with the kind of certainty that only teenagers possessed, that absolute conviction that good intentions created good outcomes. "You always tell us to do the right thing even when it's hard. So that's what you did." "It's more complicated than that." "Not really. Either something's right or it isn't." She smiled. "Someone smart told me that once." She went to bed, left him standing in the kitchen holding a dish towel, wondering when his kids had gotten wise enough to throw his own advice back at him. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. Liam got up before the kids, showered, put on jeans and a sweater that didn't have visible stains. Left a note on the kitchen counter explaining where he'd be and what time he'd be back. The coffee shop in Lincoln Park was exactly what Elena had described. Terrible coffee, good light, the kind of place that attracted people who wanted to work undisturbed rather than be seen. Liam arrived at 8:55. Elena was already there, sitting at a corner table with a laptop open and a cup of coffee she clearly hadn't touched. She looked different than she had at the gala. Less formal, hair pulled back. No makeup that he could detect. She wore jeans and an MIT sweatshirt that had seen better days. "You're early," she said as he approached. "Force of habit. 3 kids means everything runs on a schedule." "I wouldn't know. I can barely keep a houseplant alive." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit, get something to drink. Fair warning, the coffee here is genuinely terrible." He got coffee anyway. It was terrible. He sat down. "Thank you for meeting me," Elena said. "I know you have limited free time." "Sophie's watching the other 2. I have until noon." "Sophie's your oldest?" 13 going on 30. She's disturbingly competent. Elena smiled. I was like that. Drove my parents crazy. They wanted me to be a kid. I wanted to be taken seriously. We compromised by fighting about it constantly. What changed? I turned 18, started my first company, made enough money that they had to take me seriously whether they wanted to or not. She took a sip of terrible coffee, made a face. Not actually a healthy dynamic. I don't recommend it. Noted. They sat there for a moment, not quite awkward, but not quite comfortable either. Like two people who'd skipped several steps in the usual progression of getting to know each other and weren't sure how to backtrack. I read your answer, Elena said finally, about what you'd build. And I have a question. Okay. Why haven't you built it? Liam looked at his coffee. The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Because I have 3 kids and a mortgage and responsibilities that don't care about what I want to build. Because starting something means risk, and I can't afford risk. Because I've spent the last 10 years being practical instead of ambitious, and at some point practical becomes permanent. That's not true. Which part? The part about practical becoming permanent. People change careers all the time, start companies in their 30s, 40s, 50s. The only difference is how much fear you're willing to carry while you do it. Elena closed her laptop. I started Voss Innovations with $12,000 and an idea I couldn't prove would work. Spent 18 months sleeping 4 hours a night and eating ramen because I couldn't afford anything else. Nearly failed 6 times. Actually failed twice, if we're counting bankruptcies. You went bankrupt? Twice. The first company crashed because I trusted the wrong partner. The second because I didn't trust anyone and tried to do everything myself. Voss Innovations is actually my 3rd attempt. 3rd time's the charm, apparently. Liam tried to reconcile this with the image of Elena Voss from Forbes, from the business journals, from the gala where she'd commanded every room she entered. That's not in any of the profiles, he said, because failure isn't good branding. Much better to pretend you had a vision and executed it perfectly. Makes for a cleaner narrative. She leaned forward. But the truth is messier. I failed. I made terrible decisions. I trusted people I shouldn't have and didn't trust people I should have. I almost gave up more times than I can count. The only reason I didn't is because I was more afraid of spending my life working for people who didn't value what I could do than I was of being broke and starting over. That's easier to say when you don't have kids depending on you. Absolutely true. I'm not suggesting you do what I did. I'm suggesting you stop pretending that practical and right are the same thing. She paused. You told your firm you wouldn't use me as business leverage. Do you know why that matters to me? Not really. Because 99% of people in your position would have done the opposite. They would have seen an opportunity and taken it. They would have told themselves it was smart, strategic, necessary, and maybe it would have been all those things. But it wouldn't have been honest. Honesty got me demoted. In the short term, yes. But you know what happens to people who build careers on manipulation and strategic relationships? They succeed until they don't. And when they fail spectacularly because they never built anything real, just networks of people using each other. Elena met his eyes. You're better than that, and you know it. That's why you're miserable. The word hit harder than it should have. I'm not miserable. Liam, you work 80 hours a week doing brilliant analysis that nobody credits you for, at a firm that just demoted you for having principles, while raising 3 kids alone. If you're not miserable, you're numb. And I'm not sure which is worse. He wanted to argue, wanted to defend his choices, his life, his careful balance of responsibility and compromise. But sitting across from Elena Voss in a coffee shop that served terrible coffee, he couldn't find the words. I don't know what you want me to say, he said finally. I want you to say what you'd build if you weren't afraid. Not the sanitized version. The real one. Liam looked out the window. Saturday morning in Lincoln Park. People walking dogs, buying groceries, living lives that looked simple from the outside and probably weren't. I'd build a team of 5 or 6 people, he said slowly. Analysts who actually care about getting it right. We'd take on complex projects, risk assessment, portfolio optimization, market analysis. But we'd only work with clients who value accuracy over comfort. We'd be small enough to stay honest and good enough that we wouldn't have to compromise. What else? I'd want it to be sustainable, not just financially, but structurally. The kind of place where people could have lives outside of work. where being a parent didn't mean being less valuable, where competence mattered more than visibility. Keep going. I'd want to work with people I actually respect, people like Astra. He stopped. That's someone I talk to online. Anonymous forum. We've been challenging each other's analysis for months. Best professional relationship I've ever had, and I don't even know their real name. Elena was very still. What do you talk about? Everything. Market dynamics, risk models, policy implications. They're the only person I know who thinks about these things the way I do, who actually wants to get it right instead of just wanting to be right. He paused. They keep telling me I should take credit for my work. Stop being invisible. Smart person. Yeah. Liam looked at his watch. 10:30. He had 90 minutes before he needed to be home. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you care? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. You could have ignored my email and moved on with your life. Why didn't you? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone, opened something, and slid it across the table. It was a forum. The same financial analysis forum he used, the same thread where he'd posted the Meridian question 6 months ago, the same thread where Astra had first responded. Liam's brain took several seconds to process what he was seeing. You're Astra. I'm Astra. You've been... He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't organize his thoughts enough to make words happen in the right order. I've been talking to you for 6 months. I've been reading your analysis, challenging your assumptions, learning how you think. I've watched you solve problems that most analysts wouldn't recognize existed, and I've seen you give credit to other people for work that was clearly yours. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to see who you were when you didn't know you were being evaluated, when you couldn't perform or posture or try to impress anyone. I wanted to see if your work was as good as it looked, and if the person behind it was worth knowing. She took her phone back. Turns out both things are true. Liam felt like the floor had shifted. 6 months of conversations. 6 months of the only professional relationship that had ever felt real. 6 months of talking to someone he trusted without knowing who they were. That's manipulative, he said. It is. And I apologize for that. But I've been burned enough times by people who present one version of themselves publicly and another privately that I've learned to verify before I trust. Elena leaned back. If it helps, you passed every test I didn't tell you I was giving you, which is more than I can say for most people. What tests? Integrity, consistency, willingness to admit when you're wrong, ability to change your mind based on new evidence, all the things that matter in actual analytical work and almost never exist in corporate environments. So this whole thing was a job interview? No. This whole thing was me trying to figure out if the person I'd been talking to online was real or performance. Turns out you're real, which is rare enough that I wanted to meet you in person. Liam sat back, tried to process, failed. I need a minute, he said. Take your time. He got up, walked to the counter, ordered another terrible coffee he didn't want. Stood there trying to organize his thoughts into something coherent. Elena Voss was Astra, the person he'd been talking to for months, the person who'd challenged his thinking, sharpened his analysis, told him he deserved better than invisible competence, the person who'd somehow seen him when everyone else looked right through him, and she'd been evaluating him the whole time. He didn't know if he was angry or impressed or something else entirely. He went back to the table, sat down. Okay, he said. So what now? Now I make you an offer, and you decide if you're brave enough to take it. What kind of offer? Elena folded her hands on the table. I want you to build what you described. The small team, the focus on truth over optics, the sustainable structure. I'll provide the funding and the client base. You provide the vision and the work. You want to hire me? No. I want to partner with you. You build the team, you set the standards, you make the calls on which projects to take and which to refuse. I provide resources and connections, but the operation is yours. Why would you do that? Because I've been looking for someone like you for 3 years. Someone who actually knows what they're doing and won't compromise it for profit. Someone who understands that good analysis saves money in the long term, even when it costs opportunities in the short term. She paused. And because I think you're wasting your potential at Helix, and that waste bothers me more than it probably should. Liam looked at her. At Elena Voss, Billionaire CEO, one of the most successful investors in the country. offering him a chance to build exactly what he'd described in an email he'd written at midnight while doubting every word. "I have 3 kids," he said. "I can't work 80 hours a week. I can't travel constantly. I can't be the person who's always available. I don't want you to be. I want you to build something sustainable, which means normal hours and reasonable expectations and not burning people out. I don't have a network. I don't have connections. I don't have the kind of relationships that bring in clients. I have all of those things. That's my part. Your part is being brilliant at what you do and building a team that's equally brilliant. What if I fail? Then you fail. And we figure out what went wrong and try something different. That's how this works." Elena's expression softened slightly. "Liam, I've failed more times than most people try. The difference between people who succeed and people who don't isn't avoiding failure. It's being willing to fail at things that matter instead of succeeding at things that don't." He thought about Henderson's office, about being demoted for having principles, about fixing other people's mistakes for a decade while watching them get promoted, about coming home every night too tired to be the father his kids deserved. He thought about Sophie telling him to do the right thing even when it was hard. He thought about Elena, about Astra, telling him 6 months ago that he wasn't invisible, just looking in the wrong direction. "I need to think about it," he said. "Of course. Take whatever time you need. This is a big decision." Elena stood up. "But Liam, don't let fear make the decision for you. Fear is a terrible strategic advisor." She left. Liam sat in the terrible coffee shop for another 20 minutes, trying to organize his thoughts into something resembling a plan. Failed. Went home. Sophie was in the kitchen with Emma, making sandwiches that looked like faces. Jake was in the living room, building something that would definitely get stepped on later. "How was coffee?" Sophie asked. "Complicated." "Good complicated or bad complicated?" "I don't know yet." That night, after the kids were asleep, Liam opened his laptop and pulled up the forum, found the thread where he and Astra had first connected, read through 6 months of conversations with new context, every challenge, every question, every time she'd pushed him to think bigger or look deeper or consider angles he'd missed. It had all been real, and it had all been an evaluation. He should have been angry, should have felt used. Instead, he felt seen. His phone buzzed, a text from Elena. "I know you need time, but while you're thinking, consider this. What story do you want to tell your kids when they ask what you did with your life?" He looked at that message for a long time. Then he got up and went to check on them. Emma first, sleeping sideways with her rabbit. Jake diagonal across the mattress. Sophie with her headphones on, phone face down, already half asleep. What story did he want to tell them? The answer was simpler than he expected. He wanted to tell them he tried. That when opportunity appeared wearing an MIT sweatshirt in a coffee shop with terrible coffee, he'd been brave enough to reach for it. That he'd failed or succeeded on his own terms instead of slowly disappearing into someone else's org chart. He went back to his office, opened his email. "Elena, I'm in. I don't know how this works or what it looks like or if I'm capable of building what you're describing, but I'm willing to try. Because you're right. I've been afraid for so long I forgot what anything else felt like. When do we start?" Liam. He sent it, closed the laptop, went to bed, slept better than he had in years. Sunday morning brought the usual chaos of breakfast and homework and Jake's birthday party in the afternoon. But something felt different. Lighter, maybe. Like he'd been carrying something heavy for so long he'd stopped noticing the weight, and now that it was gone, the absence felt strange. His phone buzzed around noon. Elena. Tuesday morning. My office. 9 a.m. Bring questions. Sophie noticed him smiling at his phone. Good news? Maybe. I'll know Tuesday. You're being cryptic. I'm being careful. There's a difference. She rolled her eyes. Adults are weird. You're not wrong. Monday at Helix was surreal. Liam went through the motions of a job he was pretty sure he was about to quit, finished the maintenance projects they'd reassigned him to, fixed errors nobody thanked him for, avoided eye contact with people who'd stopped pretending to respect him. At 4:30, Henderson called him into his office. Liam, we need to talk about your future here. Okay. Your work is still solid, But your judgment on the Voss situation was extremely poor, and your unwillingness to work within normal business development frameworks is concerning. Henderson looked uncomfortable. We're prepared to offer you a severance package. 6 months' salary, extended benefits, a positive reference for future employment. You're firing me. We're offering you a transition opportunity. It was the same thing, wrapped in corporate language that made it sound like a favor. I accept, Liam said. Henderson blinked. Just like that? Just like that. You're not going to negotiate? Ask for more time? No, 6 months is generous. I appreciate it. Henderson looked like he'd prepared for an argument and didn't know what to do with agreement. Well, okay then. HR will have the paperwork ready tomorrow. You can work through the end of the week or leave immediately, whichever you prefer. I'll stay through the week. Tie up loose ends. He walked out of Henderson's office feeling nothing. No anger, no fear, no regret. Just a strange calm that came from knowing the decision had been made for him. Tuesday morning, Liam put on his good suit and drove to the address Elena had sent. Voss Innovations occupied 3 floors of a building in the financial district. The lobby was minimalist, efficient, exactly what he would have expected. The receptionist looked up as he approached. Liam Brooks? That's me. Ms. Voss is expecting you. 15th floor. The elevator opened directly into an office space that looked nothing like Helix. No cubicles, no gray carpet, just open spaces, natural light, and people who looked genuinely engaged in what they were doing. Elena met him at the elevator. You're early again. Force of habit. Good habit. She led him to a conference room that overlooked the city. Coffee? Only if it's terrible. She smiled. I'll see what I can do. They sat down across from each other at a table that was probably worth more than Liam's car. Elena had a folder in front of her, closed. She didn't open it immediately. Before we get into details, she said, I need to know something. Are you doing this because you believe in it, or because you just got fired and need an option? Both, Liam said. Is that a problem? No, honesty is never a problem. Desperation can be, but you don't strike me as desperate. I have 6 months of severance, 3 kids who need stability, and an offer that terrifies me. If that's not desperation, it's close enough. Elena nodded. Fair. Here's what I'm proposing. You spend the next 3 months building the framework for what we discussed. You identify the kind of analysts you want to work with. You develop the operational model. You figure out what this actually looks like in practice. I provide office space, initial funding, and access to potential clients. At the end of 3 months, we evaluate. If it's working, we move forward. If it's not, you walk away with 3 months of salary and no hard feelings. That's generous? That's practical. I don't want you committed to something that doesn't work. And I don't want to invest in something that's going to fail because we rushed it. She opened the folder. I've put together some initial parameters. Take a look. Liam read through the document. It was thorough, detailed, more thought out than anything he'd expected. The proposed structure was simple. A small analytical consulting firm focused on complex financial problems. 5 to 6 analysts maximum. Project-based work rather than retainer relationships. Complete autonomy on which clients to accept and which to refuse. Salary structure that was competitive but not excessive. Standard 40-hour weeks with flexibility for personal obligations. This is sustainable, he said, looking up. That's the idea. I've watched too many talented people burn out because they were trying to prove something. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to do good work. What's your return on this? Why would you fund something that's deliberately small? Because small doesn't mean unprofitable, and because I need analysts I can trust for my own projects. Right now, I hire outside firms and spend half my time verifying their work because I don't trust their conclusions. If I can develop a team that actually gets it right the first time, that saves me money and gives me better information. Win-win. Liam read through the financials. The numbers made sense, too much sense. Like she'd thought about this longer than just the last few days. How long have you been planning this? He asked. 3 months. Since you posted that analysis on the forum about systematic risk in the banking sector, the one that predicted the European volatility before it happened. Elena leaned back. I've been looking for someone to build this with for years. Most people either don't have the skill or don't have the integrity. You have both. So yes, I've been planning this. I apologize for the manipulation, but not for the outcome. You keep apologizing for things that worked out in my favor. That doesn't make them less manipulative. They sat there for a moment, two people who'd been having honest conversations for 6 months without knowing it, now trying to figure out how to have honest conversations face to face. I want to do this, Liam said finally, but I need to be clear about constraints. I have 3 kids. I can't work late. I can't travel extensively. I can't be the person who's always available for emergency calls. I know. That's part of why I want you, because you've already figured out how to do exceptional work within real-world limitations. Most people I know work 80-hour weeks and tell themselves it's necessary. You work smarter because you don't have a choice. That's valuable. It doesn't feel valuable. It feels like constant compromise. Welcome to adulthood. Everyone's compromising something. The question is whether you're compromising things that matter or things that don't. Elena closed the folder. Here's what I suggest. Take this home. Review it. Talk to your kids if you want their input. Think about what you actually need this to look like. Then come back Friday and tell me if we're doing this or not. Liam took the folder. And if I say no, then I keep looking, and you keep fixing other people's mistakes until you retire or die of boredom, whichever comes first. That's dark. That's accurate. He left Voss Innovations with a folder full of possibilities and a head full of doubts. Drove to Helix, went to his desk, spent the day finishing projects he'd started weeks ago. People avoided him. Word had spread that he was on his way out. Nobody wanted to be associated with failure, even secondhand. At 5:30, he packed up his desk. Not everything. He still had 3 more days, but enough that it felt like the beginning of an ending. He took a photo of his kids that had been taped to his monitor for 3 years. A coffee mug Sophie had given him that said, "World's okayest dad." The one plant that had somehow survived despite his complete neglect. Marcus stopped by as he was packing. "So it's true? You're leaving?" "End of the week." "Man, I'm sorry. I know you think Henderson overreacted, but maybe this is for the best. Fresh start somewhere else. Use the severance to find something better." Liam looked at Marcus. Young, ambitious, already climbing the ladder that led to partnerships and corner offices, and the kind of success that required forgetting who you'd been before you started climbing. "Yeah," Liam said, "maybe it is." That night, after dinner and homework and the complex negotiations required to get 3 children into bed, Liam sat down with Sophie in the kitchen. She was doing calculus homework that looked like a foreign language. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Is this going to be a serious conversation? Because I have a test tomorrow." "It's serious, but it won't take long." She put down her pencil. "Okay, what's up?" "I got offered a job." "Well, not exactly a job. More like an opportunity to build something new. But it's risky. And it would mean some changes." "What kind of changes?" "I don't know yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But I wanted to ask what you thought before I made a decision." Sophie looked at him with the particular intensity that came from being 13 and having no patience for adult evasiveness. "Are you asking my permission or my opinion?" "Your opinion. Do you want to do it?" "I think so, but I'm scared." "Of what?" "Failing, letting you guys down, making things harder when they're already hard enough." Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know what I remember about Mom?" The question caught him off guard. They didn't talk about Rebecca often. It hurt too much, usually. "What?" "I remember her telling me that scared and wrong are different things, that sometimes the right choice is the one that scares you most." Sophie picked up her pencil again. "She said that right before she went into surgery, the one she didn't come back from." Liam felt something break open in his chest. Rebecca had been terrified of that surgery, had spent the night before crying in their bedroom, convinced she wouldn't wake up. She'd been right, but she'd gone through with it anyway because the alternative was worse. "I forgot she said that," he said quietly. "I didn't. I think about it a lot." Sophie looked at him. "If you want to do this thing, do it. We'll figure out the rest. We always do." "When did you get so smart? I have good genes, and you're a pretty decent teacher when you're not being terrified of everything." She went back to her calculus. Conversation over. Decision made. Liam sat there for another minute, then went to his office and pulled out the folder Elena had given him. Read through it again with new eyes, tried to see it not as a risk but as a possibility. Failed mostly, but tried anyway. Wednesday and Thursday passed in the strange, suspended animation of knowing something was ending, but not quite being over yet. Liam finished his remaining projects, transferred files, wrote documentation for work that would probably never get referenced, did all the small administrative tasks that came with leaving a job he'd held for 9 years. On Thursday afternoon, Ellen Rodriguez found him in the break room. "I heard you took the severance," she said. "Seemed like the right choice. For what it's worth, I think Henderson made a mistake. You're one of the best analysts we have, but you scared him. By having principles? By refusing to play the game. He doesn't know what to do with that." Ellen poured herself coffee that was only marginally better than the stuff at the Lincoln Park shop. "What are you going to do next?" "Something different. Maybe something better. I'll know in 3 months." "That's cryptic." "I'm practicing." She smiled. "Well, good luck. And if the something different doesn't work out, let me know. I might have some contacts." "I appreciate that." Friday was his last day. He came in early, finished the final documentation, sent his goodbye email to the department, kept it short, professional. Didn't mention why he was leaving or where he was going, just thanked people for the opportunity and wished them well. At noon, Henderson called him in for the exit interview. HR was there. Papers to sign. Explanations of COBRA and 401k rollovers and all the administrative detritus of ending employment. "Any final questions?" the HR representative asked. "No, I think we're good." Henderson stood up, extended his hand. "Good luck, Liam. I mean that. You're talented. I hope you find a place that's a better fit." Liam shook his hand, thought about saying something pointed about what Helix valued and what it didn't, decided against it. No point burning bridges when they were already underwater. He packed the last of his desk into a cardboard box, walked out of Helix Capital at 2:47 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, got into his car. Sat there for a moment trying to feel something about ending 9 years in one place. Felt nothing. Or maybe relief. Hard to tell the difference. He drove to Voss Innovations, took the elevator to the 15th floor. The receptionist recognized him this time. "Ms. Voss is in a meeting, but she said to send you back to the conference room. She'll be there in a few minutes." Liam waited, looked out at the city, tried to imagine doing this, being here, building something that mattered instead of fixing things that didn't. Elena arrived 10 minutes later, slightly rushed, carrying a tablet and what looked like 3 different phones. "Sorry, client call ran long. They wanted to argue about market conditions like I control the Federal Reserve." She sat down, put the phones on silent. "So, have you decided?" "I have some questions first." "Okay. What happens if I build this team and we're good but not great? What happens if we're profitable but not exceptional? What happens if we're exactly what I described and it's fine but not transformative?" Elena considered this. "Then we have a solid analytical consulting firm that does good work and makes reasonable money. Why?" "Because I keep waiting for the catch, for the part where you tell me this has to be spectacular or it's not worth doing. There's no catch. I'm not looking for spectacular. I'm looking for sustainable and honest. If you can build that, we're successful. Everything else is just scale. And if I can't? If I spend 3 months trying and fail? Then you tried. And we learned something. And you move on with 3 months of salary and a reference from me that will open doors." Elena leaned forward. "Liam, I've failed at enough things to know that trying and failing is infinitely better than not trying at all. The only way you actually lose here is if you spend the next decade wondering what would have happened if you'd been brave enough to find out." He looked at the folder he'd been carrying for 3 days, at the possibility it represented, at the risk. Thought about Sophie saying scared and wrong were different things. Made his decision. "Okay," he said. "Let's do this." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Elena smiled. Not the polished professional smile from the gala. Something real. "Okay then. When can you start?" "Monday?" "Monday works. I'll have an office set up for you. Access to our research databases. Meeting with our operations team to discuss logistics." She pulled out her tablet, started making notes. "You'll need to start identifying potential team members, people you trust who think the way you do." I know one person, Rebecca Chen. She left Helix a few years ago to work for a nonprofit. She was brilliant, is brilliant, but I don't know if she'd be interested in coming back to the private sector. Call her. See, worst case, she says no and you keep looking. What about the other 4 or 5 people? You'll find them. Post on that forum you like. Reach out to people you've worked with. Trust your instincts. Elena looked up from her tablet. This is your team, your structure. I'm just providing resources. The vision is yours. They spent the next hour going through logistics. Office space on the 14th floor. Initial budget for equipment and software. Timeline for building out the team. Parameters for the kinds of projects they'd pursue. By the time Liam left, it was after 5. He drove home in Friday traffic, thinking about everything that had changed in the span of 2 weeks. From invisible analyst to unemployed to possibly building something that mattered. The kids were waiting when he got home. Sophie had made dinner, which meant pasta and sauce from a jar, but the effort counted. So, she asked as he walked in, did you do it? I did it. And? And I start Monday, building something new, something scary, something that might fail spectacularly. Sophie grinned. Good. It's about time. Jake looked up from his homework. Does this mean we're going to be rich? No, it means I'm going to try something different. But maybe rich later? Maybe. Or maybe just happy. We'll see. Emma wandered in from the living room. Are we celebrating? Can we get ice cream? It's Friday night and you did something brave, Sophie said. We're definitely getting ice cream. They got ice cream, came home, watched a movie, did all the normal Friday night things that felt different because everything was different now. Later, after the kids were asleep, Liam opened his laptop and pulled up the forum, posted in the jobs section. Small analytical consulting firm looking for exceptional analysts who value accuracy over advancement. Must be brilliant at what you do and willing to work in a collaborative environment that prioritizes truth. Sustainable hours. Competitive pay. Opportunity to build something from scratch. If you're tired of fixing other people's mistakes and want to do work that matters, let's talk. He posted it, closed the laptop, went to bed. Monday morning came too fast and not fast enough. Liam dropped the kids at school, drove to Voss Innovations, took the elevator to the 14th floor. His new office was modest but functional. Windows overlooking the city. Desk that wasn't a cubicle. Computer with access to research databases that made Helix's resources look like a public library. Elena stopped by around 10. How's it feel? Surreal. I keep waiting to wake up. You'll get used to it. Coffee? Only if it's terrible. They went to the break room. The coffee was actually good, which was somehow disappointing. I got 3 responses to your forum post already, Elena said. People are interested. That was fast. You'd be surprised how many talented people are stuck in places that don't value what they do. You just gave them an alternative. Liam spent the first week doing something he'd never done before, designing a company from scratch. Not just the analytical framework, but the culture, the values, the kind of environment he wanted to create. He called Rebecca Chen on Tuesday. She was still at the nonprofit, still brilliant, still frustrated with the limitations of working somewhere that couldn't afford to pay for her talent. You want me to come work for you? She asked, incredulous. With me. Building something new. Small team. Real work. Sustainable hours. Who's funding this? Elena Voss. There was a long pause. The Elena Voss? The one and only. Liam, what the hell happened to you? Long story. You interested? Maybe. Tell me more. They talked for an hour. By the end, Rebecca was interested enough to meet in person. They got coffee on Thursday. She met Elena on Friday. By the following Monday, she'd given notice at the nonprofit. You're insane, she told Liam. This could fail in 100 different ways. Probably. But if it works, we'll have actually built something worth building. When do I start? The other positions filled more slowly. Liam interviewed 12 candidates over 3 weeks. Most were competent but not exceptional. A few were exceptional but couldn't work within the collaborative framework he was building. 2 were perfect and knew it, which made them impossible. He found the 3rd team member on the forum, a woman named Sarah Kim, who'd been posting analytical work that was consistently 3 steps ahead of everyone else. She worked at a hedge fund in Boston, made excellent money, and was desperately bored. I spend 80% of my time in meetings justifying decisions to people who don't understand the analysis, she said during their video interview. I want to spend 80% of my time actually doing the work. That's what we're building. Why should I believe you? Because I'm offering sustainable hours, collaborative work, and the chance to refuse projects that don't make sense. If that's not appealing, we're probably not a good fit. She thought about it for a week, then relocated from Boston and became their risk assessment specialist. The fourth and fifth positions took longer. Liam was picky, maybe too picky, but Elena kept reminding him that this was about quality, not speed. Better to run lean with great people than fully staffed with adequate ones, she said. By the end of his second month, Liam had a team of 4, including himself. Rebecca, Sarah, and a quiet analyst named David Park, who'd spent 6 years at Goldman Sachs doing work he described as technically impressive and morally questionable. He wanted to do something different, something cleaner. They started taking on projects in month 3, small ones initially, a risk assessment for a mid-sized investment firm, portfolio optimization for a family office, market analysis for a tech startup considering international expansion. The work was good, better than good, and more importantly, it was honest. But not everyone saw it that way. Their first major conflict came 6 weeks in. A potential client wanted them to validate a proposed acquisition strategy. The numbers looked solid on the surface. Liam and his team spent 2 weeks digging deeper. What they found was concerning. The acquisition target had liabilities hidden in offshore structures that weren't immediately visible. The deal would work for about 18 months, then collapse under regulatory scrutiny that was almost certainly coming. Liam called the client. "We can't validate this strategy. The risk exposure is too high." But the numbers work. The surface numbers work. The underlying structure doesn't. If you proceed with this, you'll face significant regulatory and financial consequences within 2 years. That's speculative. That's our analysis, and we stand by it. The client hung up, called Elena directly, demanded that Liam be overruled. Elena called Liam into her office that afternoon. "Michael Chen is very unhappy with your assessment," she said. "I know, he called me incompetent in an email this morning. He called me too, said you were being overly conservative and killing a good deal." Liam waited. This was the test. This was where he'd find out if Elena meant what she'd said about valuing accuracy over profit. "What did you tell him?" he asked. "I told him that we don't validate deals we don't believe in, that if he wants someone to rubber stamp his decisions, he should hire a different firm. That integrity isn't negotiable." And he said he'd never work with us again, told me we'd never succeed with that attitude. Elena smiled slightly. "So I guess we're off to a good start. We just lost a client. We just avoided complicity in something that would have blown up in everyone's face. I'd call that a win." Liam felt something unknot in his chest. "You really mean it. The thing about truth over profit. I've spent my entire career watching people compromise their principles for money. It never ends well. Not actually." Elena leaned back in her chair. "We'll get other clients. Better ones. People who value what we do. But we will never, ever validate something we don't believe in just because it's profitable. Are we clear?" "Clear." But losing that client had consequences. Word spread in their industry. Some people heard integrity and were interested. Others heard difficult and stayed away. The pipeline of potential projects slowed. By month 4, they had enough work to keep the team busy, but not enough to feel secure. Liam found himself second-guessing the decision to turn down Chen's project. Maybe they could have made it work. Maybe he'd been too conservative. Maybe integrity was a luxury they couldn't afford. Rebecca found him in his office late one Thursday, staring at spreadsheets that refused to solve their business development problem. "You're spiraling," she said. "I'm strategizing." "You're spiraling. I can tell because you've reorganized your desk 3 times in the last hour." She sat down. "Talk to me." "We're barely breaking even. If we don't land 2 or 3 significant projects in the next month, we're going to have trouble making payroll. And maybe I made a mistake. Maybe turning down that acquisition deal was too pure, too idealistic. Maybe we can't afford to be that selective." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "You remember why I left Helix? You wanted to do meaningful work. I wanted to stop compromising. I wanted to wake up and not feel like I was contributing to a system that valued profit over truth. And I thought working for a nonprofit would give me that. It did, sort of. But it also gave me poverty wages and no resources and constant frustration. She met his eyes. You know what this place gives me? The chance to do excellent work without compromising. Do you know how rare that is? Not rare enough if we can't keep the lights on. We'll keep the lights on. We'll find the right clients. We'll make this work, but not by becoming the thing we left. And if we fail, then we fail with our integrity intact, which is better than succeeding as something we hate. She left him sitting there. Liam looked at his spreadsheets, at the numbers that refused to add up the way he wanted, at the possibility that Rebecca was right, and he was just scared. His phone buzzed. Text from Elena. Conference room, now, bring the team. Liam gathered everyone. Rebecca, Sarah, David. They filed into the conference room looking concerned. Emergency meetings were never good news. Elena was already there, laptop open. We have a problem. I know, Liam said. The client pipeline, not that problem, a different one. Helix Capital is holding a joint presentation with 3 other firms next week, pitching a massive infrastructure fund to a consortium of institutional investors, $250 million in capital. And their analysis is catastrophically wrong. She turned her laptop around, showed them the preliminary prospectus that had been leaked to her by someone inside one of the participating firms. Liam scanned it, felt his stomach drop. The fund was built on assumptions about government policy that weren't just optimistic, they were fantasy. The risk models ignored political volatility entirely. The return projections assumed regulatory environments that didn't exist and weren't coming. It was the Meridian deal all over again, except bigger, much bigger. This is going to fail, Sarah said, reading over his shoulder. Worse than fail, David added. This is going to trigger investigations, the kind that make headlines and end careers. How did you get this? Liam asked Elena. Source inside one of the participating firms. Someone who's been watching what we do and likes our approach. They're concerned but can't speak up without getting fired. Elena closed the laptop. So here's the situation. We can let this play out and watch $250 million evaporate along with several companies' reputations. Or we can intervene. Intervene how? Rebecca asked. We crash the presentation, show up with our own analysis, expose the flaws publicly before the capital gets committed. Liam stared at her. That would make enemies of every firm involved. Yes. It would probably kill any chance we have of working with institutional clients in this market. Possibly. It could destroy us before we're even established. It could, but it would also prevent a catastrophic failure that will hurt actual people. Pension funds. Retirement accounts. Ordinary people who trust institutional investors to make sound decisions. Elena looked at each of them in turn. This is what we said we'd do. Prioritize truth over profit. This is what that looks like in practice. The room was silent. Finally, David spoke. How long do we have to prepare a counter-analysis? 5 days. That's not enough time. It's what we have. Liam looked at his team. At Rebecca, who'd left a stable job to build something meaningful. At Sarah, who'd given up excellent money for honest work. At David, who'd walked away from Goldman for moral reasons he'd never quite articulated until now. Show of hands, he said. Who wants to do this? 4 hands went up. All of them. Okay then, Liam said. We crashed the presentation. They spent the next 5 days doing the most intensive analytical work of their careers. Liam rebuilt the entire infrastructure model from scratch. Rebecca stress-tested every assumption. Sarah ran risk scenarios that accounted for actual political volatility rather than wishful thinking. David traced the regulatory implications through 3 different jurisdiction frameworks. They worked 16-hour days, lived on coffee and takeout, barely saw their families. Every assumption in the original prospectus got challenged, verified, or demolished. By day 4, they had a counter-analysis that was bulletproof. By day 5, they had a presentation that would destroy the infrastructure fund proposal in front of the entire institutional investment community. Last chance to back out, Elena said the night before the presentation. Once we do this, there's no undoing it. Are we right? Liam asked. Completely. Then we're not backing out. The presentation was scheduled for Tuesday morning at the Fairmont Hotel. Ballroom C. 200 institutional investors representing billions in potential capital. Helix Capital was presenting along with Sterling Investments, Apex Financial Group, and Cornerstone Advisors. Henderson would be there. Marcus would be there. Everyone Liam had worked with for 9 years would be there. Liam and his team arrived at 9:30. The presentation started at 10 o'clock. They had 30 minutes to figure out how to get access to a room they weren't invited to. Elena solved that problem by being Elena Voss. She walked up to registration, announced that she was representing a major potential investor, and asked for credentials. They gave them to her immediately. 5 badges. 5 seats in the back of the ballroom. The presentation started exactly on time. Henderson was first. He opened with the broad vision, transforming American infrastructure through strategic private investment. Sounded good, professional. Almost plausible if you didn't look too closely at the numbers. Sterling went second. Detailed the investment structure, explained the return timeline, made everything sound safe and profitable and inevitable. Apex went third. Presented the risk analysis that wasn't actually an analysis at all, just a series of reassurances wrapped in technical language. Cornerstone was last. They showed the projected returns, 22% annually over 10 years. Numbers so good they should have triggered immediate skepticism from anyone paying attention. Nobody asked difficult questions. Nobody challenged the assumptions. 200 sophisticated investors sat there and prepared to commit capital to a fantasy. The presentation ended at 11:15. Questions opened at 11:20. Liam stood up. "I have a question," he said. His voice carried across the ballroom. Henderson's head snapped around. Recognition dawned on his face, followed by something that looked like anger and panic combined. "I'm sorry, this is a closed presentation," Henderson said. "Only invited investors." "Liam Brooks," Elena called out, standing beside him. "Brooks Analytical Consulting, representing Voss Innovations." She smiled slightly. "We're very interested in understanding the risk model you've presented." You could have heard a pin drop. Henderson recovered quickly. "Of course. What's your question?" Your infrastructure fund assumes regulatory stability across multiple jurisdictions, but 3 of your targeted sectors are currently under active review by federal oversight committees. How are you accounting for policy changes that could fundamentally alter your return projections? We factored in standard regulatory evolution. Standard evolution or complete policy overhaul? Because the Senate Infrastructure Committee is drafting legislation that would eliminate private investment advantages in 2 of your primary sectors. That's not evolution, that's transformation. Henderson looked at the Sterling CEO, at Apex's CFO, at Cornerstone's head of investor relations. Nobody had an answer. We've accounted for various scenarios, Henderson said finally. Which scenarios specifically? Rebecca stood up now. Because your risk model doesn't mention the pending environmental compliance regulations. It doesn't address the labor law changes currently in committee. It doesn't account for state-level opposition to private infrastructure partnerships in 6 of your 12 targeted regions. The room was very quiet now. Investors were pulling out phones, making notes, exchanging glances. Sarah stood up next. Your return projections assume a political environment that doesn't exist. You're selling certainty in a context that's anything but certain. And when those regulatory changes hit, and they will hit, this fund is going to lose capital faster than you can rebalance the portfolio. This is completely inappropriate. The Sterling CEO tried to intervene. What's inappropriate, David said, standing now too, is asking institutional investors to commit capital to a fund built on wishful thinking instead of analysis. We've spent the last week rebuilding your models with actual political and regulatory context. The returns you're projecting? They disappear in year 2. By year 4, this fund is underwater. By year 6, you're looking at legal exposure for misrepresentation. The ballroom erupted, investors talking over each other. The presenting firms trying to regain control. Henderson's face had gone from angry to pale. Elena stepped into the aisle. We have a full counter-analysis available for anyone interested. 50 pages. Every assumption tested. Every projection verified. We're happy to share it with any investor who wants to make an informed decision instead of a hopeful one. This is sabotage, Henderson shouted. These people are not qualified. Liam Brooks spent 9 years at Helix Capital fixing your mistakes, Elena said calmly. He's the analyst who saved you $18 million on the Meridian deal. The one who prevented the European portfolio disaster. The one whose work you took credit for while keeping him invisible. He's more qualified to assess this fund than anyone in this room, including you." The silence that followed was absolute. Liam looked at Henderson across the ballroom, at the man who'd told him principles were a luxury he couldn't afford, at the system that had kept him invisible for years while using his work to advance other people's careers. "We're not here to sabotage anything," Liam said quietly. "We're here to prevent 200 sophisticated investors from making a catastrophic mistake, that's all." Henderson didn't respond. Couldn't, probably. The conference organizer stepped forward. "I think we need to take a break. Reconvene in 30 minutes. The ballroom cleared slowly. Investors clustering around Liam's team, asking questions, requesting copies of the counter-analysis. The presenting firms huddled in strategic groups, doing damage control that probably wouldn't be enough. Elena pulled Liam aside. "You know what you just did, right? Ended any chance we had of working with most of these firms? Possibly. You also just established yourselves as the most credible analytical team in the room. People are going to remember this. Will they remember it positively? The ones who value accuracy over comfort will. The ones who don't?" Elena shrugged. "We didn't want those clients anyway." The presentation never reconvened. By the time the 30-minute break was over, the infrastructure fund had quietly collapsed. Helix withdrew. Sterling withdrew. The whole thing fell apart before anyone could commit capital. Liam's phone started ringing before they'd even left the hotel. First call was from a reporter at the Financial Times. Second was from an investor who'd been in the ballroom and wanted to hire them immediately. Third was a blocked number that he didn't answer because blocked numbers were never good news. "Turn it off," Elena said as they walked to the parking garage. "All of you, turn off your phones for the next 2 hours. Go home. Decompress. We'll deal with the aftermath tomorrow." "We just blew up a $250 million deal," Sarah said. "There's going to be fallout." "Absolutely. And we'll handle it. But not today. Today you did something extraordinary. Take the win." Liam drove home in a daze. The adrenaline that had carried him through the presentation was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion and the beginning of doubt. They'd done the right thing. He was sure of that. But right and smart weren't always the same. Sophie was waiting when he got home. She took one look at his face and said, "You did something big." "How can you tell?" "You look like you're about to throw up or pass out, maybe both." She handed him a glass of water. "Sit down. Tell me what happened." He told her, the whole thing. The infrastructure fund, the flawed analysis, the presentation, the confrontation. Sophie listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern to something that might have been pride. "So you basically called out a bunch of powerful companies in front of everyone?" she asked when he finished. "More or less. And you knew it might destroy your new business?" "Yeah. But you did it anyway because it was the right thing to do?" "That was the reasoning," Sophie grinned. "Mom would have been proud of you." The comment hit harder than it should have. Liam felt his throat tighten. Rebecca had been gone 3 years, and most days he was okay with that. Most days he could function without the weight of her absence crushing his chest. But some days, days like today, he felt it all over again. "Thanks, Soph. I'm serious. She always said the world needed more people who were willing to tell the truth, even when it cost them something. That's what you did." Jake wandered in from the living room. "Are we getting ice cream again?" "Why would we get ice cream?" Liam asked. "Because that's what we do when something important happens. And Sophie has that face she gets when something important happened." "It's Friday," Sophie said. "We're getting ice cream regardless." They got ice cream. Emma insisted on trying a new flavor that she hated after 2 bites. Jake dropped his cone on the sidewalk and cried until Liam bought him another one. Sophie ate hers in thoughtful silence, occasionally glancing at Liam like she was trying to figure out a complicated equation. "You okay?" Liam asked her on the drive home. "I'm fine. Just thinking." About? About how scary it must be to do the right thing when everyone's watching. When you were at Helix, nobody noticed you. Now people notice. That's harder, right? Liam looked at his daughter, 13 years old and already understanding things most adults spent lifetimes avoiding. "Yeah," he said. "It's harder. But you're going to keep doing it anyway?" "I don't know how to do anything else." Sophie nodded like this confirmed something she'd already suspected. "Good, because we didn't raise you to be a coward." I'm pretty sure I raised you, not the other way around. Semantics. That night, after the kids were in bed, Liam finally turned his phone back on. 43 missed calls, 67 text messages, 32 emails marked urgent. He started with the emails. Half were from reporters wanting comments. A quarter were from investors expressing interest in Brooks Analytical Consulting. The rest were mixed, some supportive, some hostile, some just confused about what had happened and why. One email stood out. From Henderson. Subject line, "We need to talk." Liam almost deleted it. Almost. But curiosity won. The message was short. "What you did today was unprofessional, reckless, and damaging to multiple firms' reputations. It was also probably necessary. I'm not thanking you, but I'm not coming after you either. Or even now, don't contact me again." Liam read it twice. Tried to figure out if it was an olive branch or a threat disguised as neutrality. Settled on it being exactly what it claimed. Acknowledgement that they were done with each other. He deleted it. Moved on to the text messages. Most were from people he barely knew, congratulating him or condemning him depending on their perspective. Marcus had sent 3 messages, each progressively more worried about his own career now that Helix's reputation had taken a hit. Ellen had sent one. "You've got guts. Hope you know what you're doing." The last message was from Elena, timestamped 20 minutes ago. "Check the news, we're trending." Liam pulled up the Financial Times. There it was, above the fold. Upstart analytics firm exposes major infrastructure fund flaws, saves investors billions. The article was detailed, surprisingly balanced, and quoted multiple investors who'd been in the ballroom. All of them said some version of the same thing. Brooks Analytical Consulting had prevented a disaster by having the integrity to speak truth to power. Liam read the article 3 times, tried to feel proud, felt terrified instead, because now people were watching. Now there were expectations. Now every decision they made would be scrutinized and compared to this moment when they'd been brave enough to blow up a bad deal in front of everyone who mattered. He closed his laptop, tried to sleep, failed. Saturday morning brought more calls, more emails, more attention than Liam had experienced in his entire career. Rebecca texted him at 7 a.m. "Have you seen the journal? We're on page 3. He hadn't. He pulled it up. The Wall Street Journal article was longer, more analytical, and included interviews with industry experts debating whether what they'd done was heroic or inappropriate. The consensus seemed to be both. By noon, they had 17 new client inquiries. By evening, it was 24. By Sunday morning, Elena called an emergency team meeting. "We have a problem," she said when they gathered in the conference room. "A good problem, but still a problem. We're getting more interest than we can handle." "That's what happens when you make headlines," David said. "It's also what happens when you prove you're willing to prioritize accuracy over relationships. People want that. They want analysts they can trust." Elena pulled up a spreadsheet. "I've been screening the inquiries. Half are legitimate. A quarter are from firms trying to poach you. The rest are tire kickers who want to say they talked to the team from the Fairmont." "What are we doing about it?" Sarah asked. "Hiring. 2 more analysts, maybe 3. Someone to handle business development so you can focus on analysis. Operations support." Elena looked at Liam. "This is your call. We can scale up or stay small, but we can't stay small and handle this volume." Liam felt the weight of everyone's attention. This was the moment, the decision that would define what they became. "How fast can we hire without compromising quality?" he asked. 3 months if we're careful, 6 if we're very careful. "Then we're very careful. I don't want to build something that works for 6 months and collapses because we scaled too fast. I want to build something that lasts." "That means turning down work," Rebecca said. "A lot of work." "I know." "Some of these clients won't wait. They'll go somewhere else." "Then they weren't the right clients." Elena smiled slightly. "You're learning." They spent the rest of Sunday screening inquiries and drafting responses. By evening, they'd identified 8 projects worth pursuing and politely declined the rest. It felt wasteful. It felt necessary. It felt like the only way to stay true to what they'd said they were building. Monday brought different problems. Liam was in his office reviewing a potential client's portfolio when his assistant, they'd hired an assistant 2 weeks ago, a quiet woman named Marie, who was terrifyingly organized, knocked on his door. "There's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important." "Who is it?" Trevor Walsh. He says you used to work together. Liam felt his stomach drop. Trevor from Helix. Trevor who'd taken credit for his work. Trevor who was now probably here because Helix was imploding and he needed an exit strategy. Send him in. Trevor walked in looking exactly like Liam remembered. Sharp suit, practiced smile, the kind of confidence that came from never doubting yourself even when you should. Brooks, hell of a thing you did last week. What do you want, Trevor? Straight to business. I can respect that. Trevor sat down without being invited. I'm leaving Helix. It's a mess over there. Henderson's being investigated. Sterling and Apex are pointing fingers. The whole infrastructure fund thing is turning into a regulatory nightmare. I'm aware. I want to join your team. Liam stared at him. You're serious. Completely. Look, I know we haven't always seen eye to eye. I know I took credit for work you did. That was business, nothing personal, but I can see what you're building here, and I want to be part of it. You want to be part of a team that prioritizes integrity over advancement? I want to be part of a team that's making headlines and getting high-profile clients. The integrity thing is fine too, I guess. That's not how this works, Trevor. Come on, Brooks. You need experienced analysts. I have 10 years at Helix. I know the industry. I have connections. I can bring clients. We don't need analysts who bring clients. We need analysts who do honest work. Trevor's practiced smile faltered slightly. You're really going to turn me down? I really am. Because of some grudge about credit on projects from years ago? You don't understand what we're doing here. This isn't Helix with better press. This is something different, and you'd never fit. Trevor stood up. The smile was gone now. You're making a mistake. I could have helped you. But fine. Enjoy your principles. See how long they last when the headlines fade and you need actual revenue. He left. Marie appeared in the doorway 30 seconds later. That seemed tense. It was necessary. For what it's worth, I heard the whole thing. You made the right call. Liam looked at her. You were listening? Your door was open. Sound carries. Also, yes, I was listening. Part of my job is protecting you from people who waste your time. He wasted your time. Remind me to give you a raise. I will. Frequently. The week continued in the same pattern. More inquiries, more attention, more people from Liam's past showing up with opportunities that looked good on the surface and fell apart under scrutiny. On Wednesday, Ellen Rodriguez called. I heard you're hiring, she said. We are. Carefully. I want to apply. Liam paused. Ellen had been decent to him at Helix, had given him honest advice when she could, but she'd also been part of the system that kept him invisible for 9 years. Why? He asked. Because I'm tired of working for firms that value perception over reality. I'm tired of managing relationships with clients who want to be told what they want to hear instead of what they need to know. I'm tired of compromising. She paused. I know I was complicit in that system. I know I benefited from it. But I want to do better. And I think you're building a place where that's possible. This isn't investor relations, Ellen. We don't have that role. Then I'll learn analysis. I'm good with numbers. I'm good with people. And I'm very good at keeping organizations running smoothly. Use me however makes sense. I just want to be part of something that doesn't make me feel dirty at the end of the day. Liam thought about it. Talked to the team. They were skeptical but willing to interview her. Ellen came in Friday, spent 3 hours being questioned by Rebecca, Sarah, and David. They threw scenarios at her. Ethical dilemmas, situations where profit and principle conflicted. She didn't give them perfect answers, but she gave them honest ones. I'd hire her, Rebecca said after Ellen left. She's been part of the problem, but she knows it. That's more self-awareness than most people have. Agreed, Sarah said. Plus, we actually do need someone who understands client relations. We're all analysts. None of us are good at the people side. David just nodded. She'll fit. They offered Ellen a position on Monday. She accepted immediately. Started 2 weeks later. Within a month, she'd reorganized their entire client intake process and was handling relationship management in a way that actually aligned with their values. By the end of their 4th month, Brooks Analytical Consulting had 6 analysts, Ellen managing operations, Marie keeping everything organized, and more work than they could handle even working full capacity. They were succeeding. And Liam was miserable. Not because the work was bad, the work was exceptional. They were doing exactly what he'd wanted to build. Honest analysis, sustainable hours, meaningful projects. They were making money, building reputation, creating something that mattered. But he was working 60-hour weeks, missing Jake's soccer games, barely seeing Emma, watching Sophie grow up in the margins of his schedule. The whole point had been to build something sustainable, and somehow he'd built another version of the trap he'd escaped. Rebecca noticed first. "You're burning out," she said one evening when everyone else had gone home and Liam was still at his desk. "I'm fine." "You're not. You're doing the same thing you did at Helix, working yourself to death because you think that's what success requires. We have clients, deadlines, responsibilities. We also have a team, delegate. Let other people carry the weight. That's why we hired them. I can't ask people to do work I'm not willing to do myself. That's not delegation, Liam. That's martyrdom, and it's not sustainable." Rebecca sat down across from him. "You built something good here. Don't destroy it by forgetting to take care of yourself." He knew she was right. Knowing didn't make it easier. That weekend, Sophie confronted him more directly. "When's the last time you came to one of Jake's games?" she asked Saturday morning. "I've been busy." "You're always busy. You were busy at Helix. You're busy now. When does it stop? When we're more established, when we can afford to." "When exactly? Give me a date, a specific time when you'll stop being too busy for us." Liam didn't have an answer. "That's what I thought." Sophie wasn't angry, just disappointed, which was worse. "You left Helix because you wanted to build something better, but you're doing the same thing, just with a different company name." She was right. He'd escaped one trap and built another, different architecture, same cage. Elena noticed too, called him into her office Monday morning. "You look terrible," she said. "Thanks. That's encouraging." "I'm serious. When's the last time you slept more than 5 hours?" Liam couldn't remember. "That's a problem, because you're not going to build something sustainable if you work yourself into the ground, and you're setting a terrible example for your team. Everyone's working hard. Everyone's working hard because you're working insane hours, and they think that's expected. It's not. It shouldn't be. We specifically built this to avoid that." Elena leaned forward. "I'm giving you an order. Take a week off. Completely off. No email, no phone calls, no checking in. Let Rebecca run things. She's capable. We're always in the middle of something. That's how business works. But if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to collapse. And then we'll really be in trouble." Liam wanted to argue. Couldn't find the logic to support it. "1 week," Elena said. "Starting now. Go home. Be with your kids. Remember what you're actually working for." He went home. Sophie was surprised to see him at 2 p.m. on a Monday. "Did you get fired again?" "Forced vacation. I have a week off." "Seriously?" "Seriously." Jake overheard and came running. "Does this mean you can come to my game tomorrow?" "Yeah, buddy, I can come to your game." "And help with my science project?" "That too." Emma appeared from her room. "Can we go to the zoo?" "We can go to the zoo." Sophie just smiled. "Look at that. You remember how to be a dad." The week was strange. Liam kept reaching for his phone, checking email out of habit, feeling guilty for not working. But he forced himself to stop, to be present, to remember what it felt like to exist outside of work. He went to Jake's soccer game, watched his son chase a ball with enthusiasm that exceeded skill, cheered at appropriate moments, didn't think about portfolios or risk models or client deadlines. He helped with the science project, built a volcano with Jake that only partially exploded, called it a learning experience. Let Jake think it was intentional. He took Emma to the zoo, answered questions about why flamingos were pink and whether penguins got cold and if elephants remembered everything like people said they did. Made up answers when he didn't know. Emma didn't seem to mind. He talked to Sophie. Really talked. About school, about friends, about the things she worried about and the things she was excited about. Listened more than he spoke. Learned things about his daughter he'd been too busy to notice. By Thursday, he felt human again. By Saturday, he felt guilty for feeling human. By Sunday, he understood why Elena had forced him to take the week. He called her Sunday evening. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For making me stop. I needed to stop. I didn't know how." That's the hardest part, knowing when to stop. Most people never figure it out. Elena paused. "How do you feel?" "Better? Scared to go back." "Because you're afraid you'll fall into the same pattern?" "Yeah." "Then don't. Set boundaries. Stick to them. Let your team do their jobs. Trust that the work will get done without you micromanaging every detail." "What if something falls through the cracks?" "Then something falls through the cracks and we fix it. That's better than you collapsing because you tried to hold everything yourself." Monday morning, Liam went back to work. Walked into the office expecting chaos. Found everything running smoothly. Rebecca had handled 3 client meetings. Sarah had completed a major risk assessment. David had identified a critical flaw in a potential investment strategy and saved a client from making a terrible decision. They'd done it all without him. "See?" Rebecca said when she found him staring at the project log. "The world doesn't end when you're not here." "That's almost insulting. That's liberating. You built a team that's capable of functioning without you. That's success." She was right. He'd been so focused on being indispensable that he'd missed the whole point of building a team. The point wasn't to do everything himself. It was to create a system that worked without requiring his constant intervention. He started delegating more, trusting more, working reasonable hours and going home when he was supposed to go home. It was harder than it should have been. Every instinct said to stay, to work, to prove his value through exhaustion. But he forced himself to stop. To be a father first and an analyst second. To remember that the whole point of this had been to build something sustainable. By their 6th month, Brooks Analytical Consulting had a rhythm. Good work, honest analysis, sustainable hours. They'd turned down more projects than they'd accepted, lost clients who wanted them to validate bad decisions, gained clients who valued truth over comfort. They were profitable. Not spectacularly so, but enough. Enough to make payroll, enough to give modest bonuses, enough to prove that integrity and business success weren't mutually exclusive. Liam started sleeping better, seeing his kids more, actually using the gym membership he'd maintained for 3 years without visiting. Small things that added up to feeling like a person instead of just a function. And then, 7 months after the Fairmont presentation, everything changed again. Liam was in his office reviewing a portfolio analysis when Marie knocked. "There's someone here to see you. She says she's from the SEC. His stomach dropped. "The Securities and Exchange Commission?" "That's the one." The woman who walked into his office looked exactly like someone from a federal regulatory agency should look. Professional suit, government issue briefcase, expression that gave away nothing. "Mr. Brooks, I'm Jennifer Martinez, investigator with the SEC. She showed him credentials. "I need to talk to you about the infrastructure fund presentation from 7 months ago." Liam felt ice in his veins. "Am I being investigated?" "No, but Helix Capital is, along with Sterling Investments, Apex Financial, and Cornerstone Advisors. We're examining whether they knowingly misrepresented material facts to potential investors." She sat down without being invited. "Your intervention at the Fairmont prevented capital from being committed to a fund built on false projections. We need your analysis and your testimony." "My testimony?" "The counter-analysis your team presented, the evidence you compiled, your willingness to go on record about what you found." Martinez pulled out a folder. "This is serious, Mr. Brooks. If these firms knowingly defrauded investors, people go to prison. But we need evidence. We need expert testimony. We need someone who understood what they were doing and can explain it clearly." Liam stared at the folder, at the possibility of testifying against his former employer, against people he'd worked with for 9 years, against a system he'd been part of even if he'd never fully belonged to it. "I need to think about this," he said. "Of course. But don't think too long. The investigation is time-sensitive. If you're willing to cooperate, we need to know soon." She stood up. "You did something brave at that presentation. This is a chance to finish what you started." She left. Liam sat in his office, staring at the folder she'd left behind. Inside was a subpoena, a request for documents, a formal invitation to testify before federal investigators about everything he knew. This was it. The real test. Not just having principles, but defending them when it meant standing against people who could make his life very difficult. He called Elena. "The SEC wants me to testify against Helix," he said. "I know. They contacted me too. Asked about Voss Innovations' involvement." "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That we had evidence of misrepresentation and we acted on it. That we stand by our analysis." She paused. "What are you going to tell them?" Liam looked at the folder, at everything it represented. "I don't know yet." That night, Liam sat at the kitchen table with the SEC folder in front of him and his kids doing homework around him. Emma was coloring something that might have been a horse or might have been a dog. Jake was working through multiplication tables with the kind of determination that suggested he was getting most of them wrong. Sophie had her calculus textbook open but was watching him instead. "Big decision?" she asked. "Yeah. The kind where you already know the answer but you're scared to admit it?" Liam looked at his daughter. "When did you learn to read minds?" "I've been watching you my whole life. You get this look when you know what's right, but it's going to be hard. Same look you had before you left Helix. Same look you had before the Fairmont thing." She closed her textbook. "What is it this time?" He told her about the SEC investigation, about the request for testimony, about what it would mean to formally testify against people he'd worked with for years. Sophie listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "Are they guilty?" "I think so. The evidence suggests they knew the projections were unrealistic." "Then you testify. That's not complicated. It's more complicated than that. These are powerful people. They have lawyers, resources. They can make this very difficult. So what? You didn't do anything wrong. They did. You're just telling the truth about it. Sometimes telling the truth has consequences, and sometimes not telling the truth has worse consequences." Sophie leaned forward. "Dad, you spent 9 years at a place that kept you invisible because you wouldn't lie for them. You started this whole new thing because you wanted to do work that mattered. This is work that matters. This is exactly why you built what you built." Jake looked up from his multiplication tables. "Are bad people going to jail?" "Maybe. If I testify." "Then you should testify. Bad people should go to jail. That's how it works." Emma added without looking up from her coloring. "Also, you always tell us to do the right thing even when it's scary. So you have to do the right thing too. Otherwise, you're a hypocrite." "Hypocrite," Liam corrected automatically. "That too." He looked at his 3 children, ages 7, 10, and 13. Too young to understand the complexity, but old enough to understand the principle. Do the right thing even when it's hard. He'd been teaching them that their entire lives. Now they were holding him to it. "Okay," he said. "I'll testify." Sophie smiled. "Good. Now can you help Jake with his math? He's been staring at the same problem for 10 minutes. The next morning, Liam called Jennifer Martinez and told her he'd cooperate fully. She scheduled him for a formal interview the following week. In the meantime, she needed all documentation related to the infrastructure fund analysis. Rebecca, Sarah, and David spent 3 days compiling everything: the original prospectus, their counter-analysis, email chains showing the development of their conclusions, notes from meetings, every piece of evidence that demonstrated Helix and the other firms had known their projections were unrealistic. "This is damning," Sarah said, reviewing the compiled materials. "They can't claim ignorance. The internal communications show they discussed the political risks and chose to ignore them. Will it be enough for prosecution?" David asked. "That's not our call. We just provide the evidence. The SEC decides what to do with it." Liam's formal interview took 6 hours. Martinez and 2 other investigators went through every detail of his analysis, asked him to explain his methodology, challenged his conclusions, tested whether his testimony would hold up under cross-examination. "You're very precise," Martinez said at one point. "Most witnesses hedge, use qualifiers. You don't. The numbers either add up or they don't. There's no hedge in mathematics. That's going to make you an excellent witness, or a terrible one. Defense attorneys don't like certainty. Defense attorneys don't like truth. That's different." Martinez smiled slightly. "Fair point." 2 weeks after Liam's interview, the SEC announced formal charges against Helix Capital, Sterling Investments, Apex Financial Group, and Cornerstone Advisors. Securities fraud, misrepresentation of material facts, conspiracy to defraud investors. The business journals went wild. The Financial Times ran a front-page story. The Wall Street Journal did a deep dive on the culture of institutional investment firms and how pressure to generate returns created incentives for fraud. Liam's name was in every article. Brooks Analytical Consulting was mentioned repeatedly as the firm that had exposed the fraud. Their phones started ringing constantly, investors wanting their services, media wanting interviews, other whistleblowers wanting advice on how to come forward. "We need to be careful," Elena said during an emergency meeting. "This kind of attention can destroy us if we're not strategic about it." "How so?" Rebecca asked. "Because now we're the firm that testifies against clients. That makes us valuable to some people and dangerous to others. We need to make sure we're only working with the people who value what we do." "We've already been doing that," Liam pointed out. "We need to do it better, more explicitly. I want to add language to our engagement contracts, clear statements that will always prioritize accuracy over client preference, that we reserve the right to refuse work or withdraw from projects if we discover misrepresentation, that we'll cooperate with regulatory investigations if required." "That's going to scare off some clients," Sarah said. "Good. Those are exactly the clients we don't want." They revised their contracts, added the new language, lost 3 potential clients immediately, gained 5 others who specifically wanted to work with a firm that had that kind of explicit commitment to integrity. The SEC investigation took months: depositions, document reviews, negotiations between defense attorneys and prosecutors. Liam was called to testify twice more, each time spending hours walking through his analysis with people who were trying to find holes in his conclusions. They never found any. The numbers were what they were. 8 months after the initial charges, Helix Capital settled, $50 million in fines. Henderson and 2 senior partners agreed to permanent bans from the securities industry. No prison time, but their careers were over. Sterling and Apex fought longer, went to trial. Liam testified in both cases, spent 3 days on the witness stand explaining risk models and return projections and political volatility to juries who had no background in finance. The defense attorneys tried to discredit him, suggested he had a grudge against Helix, implied his analysis was biased by personal animosity, questioned his qualifications and his methodology and his conclusions. Liam answered every question the same way, calmly, precisely, with evidence. "Mr. Brooks," one defense attorney said during cross-examination, "isn't it true that you were fired from Helix Capital? I was offered a severance package and accepted it. The terminology doesn't change the substance of my analysis. And isn't it true that you felt undervalued at Helix? That you believed you deserved more recognition for your work? That's accurate. It is also irrelevant to whether the infrastructure fund projections were realistic. How can we trust that your analysis isn't influenced by personal resentment? Because mathematics doesn't care about my feelings. The projections assumed regulatory stability that didn't exist. That's not an opinion. That's a fact supported by committee records, legislative drafts, and policy statements from 6 different governmental bodies." The attorney tried a different approach. "Mr. Brooks, you've built a very successful business on the reputation you gained from opposing this infrastructure fund. Isn't it in your financial interest to maintain that this fund was fraudulent?" "My business is built on providing accurate analysis. If this fund had been solid, I would have said so. The fact that it wasn't doesn't become true just because acknowledging it benefits me. But you can't deny that you've profited from this situation." "I've profited from doing my job. That's how employment works. The question isn't whether I benefited from telling the truth. The question is whether the truth I told was accurate, and it was." Sterling was convicted. 3 executives received prison sentences. The firm was dissolved. Apex settled the morning their verdict was supposed to be announced. $50 million in fines plus restitution to investors who'd committed preliminary capital. Cornerstone fought until the end. Lost. Ceased operations within 6 months. The entire process took a year and a half. From the Fairmont presentation to the final conviction. 18 months of testimony and depositions and media attention and constant scrutiny. Through it all, Liam kept working, kept building, kept trying to maintain the balance between being present for his kids and running a business that had grown beyond what he'd initially imagined. Brooks Analytical Consulting expanded to 12 employees. They moved to larger office space, developed specialized teams for different types of analysis, created a training program for new analysts that emphasized ethical decision-making alongside technical skill. They became known as the firm that told the truth even when it was inconvenient. Some clients loved them for it. Others avoided them entirely. Liam was fine with both outcomes. Sophie graduated middle school and started high school. Jake discovered he was actually good at basketball, which was surprising to everyone, including Jake. Emma developed an inexplicable obsession with marine biology and wanted to know everything about octopuses. Liam went to Sophie's graduation, to Jake's basketball games, to the aquarium with Emma more times than seemed reasonable. He worked 45 hours a week instead of 80. He slept 7 hours most nights. He remembered what it felt like to be a person instead of just a function. And then, 2 years after the Fairmont presentation, Elena asked him to meet for coffee. They went to the same terrible coffee shop in Lincoln Park where they'd had their first real conversation. Elena ordered the same terrible coffee. Liam did too. Some traditions were worth maintaining. "I have a proposition for you," Elena said once they were seated. "I'm listening." Voss Innovations is expanding. I'm creating a new division focused on institutional investment oversight. Essentially, we'll be providing the kind of analytical review that prevents the kind of fraud that happened with the infrastructure fund. We'll work with investment firms, pension funds, institutional clients, help them verify that what they're being sold is actually what they're getting. That sounds like what we already do. It is, which is why I want you to run it. Liam put down his coffee. You want me to leave Brooks Analytical? No, I want you to expand it, integrate it into Voss Innovations. You keep operational control. You keep your team, you keep your values and your decision-making authority, but you get access to resources, clients, and infrastructure that would take you another decade to build independently. Why would you offer that? Because I've spent 2 years watching you build exactly what you said you'd build. A team that prioritizes truth over profit. A structure that's sustainable. Work that matters. And I want to scale it. I want to take what you've created and make it available to more clients, prevent more frauds, save more people from making terrible investments. Elena leaned forward. But I won't do it without you. Because the whole thing only works if the person running it actually believes in what they're doing. And you do. That's rare. Liam thought about it. About what it would mean to integrate into a larger organization. About whether he could maintain what he'd built within someone else's structure. I need guarantees, he said finally. Name them. Complete autonomy on analytical decisions. No pressure to validate investments we don't believe in. No interference in hiring or team structure. And if Voss Innovations ever asks us to compromise our standards, we walk away with full ownership of Brooks Analytical. Done. I'll have legal draft the agreement. Just like that. Just like that. I've been planning this for 6 months, Liam. I didn't bring it up until I was certain you'd actually accept on the right terms. Elena smiled. You're not the only one who thinks carefully before making decisions. The integration took 4 months. Legal negotiations, structural planning, team meetings where Liam explained what was happening and why, and what it would mean for their work. Some people were nervous about becoming part of a larger organization. Rebecca worried they'd lose what made them special. Sarah questioned whether Voss Innovations would really maintain the autonomy they'd been promised. David just wanted confirmation that their contracts wouldn't change. We're not being absorbed, Liam told them during one particularly tense meeting. We're expanding. We keep our identity. We keep our structure. We just get access to resources we couldn't build ourselves. And if it doesn't work, Rebecca asked, then we leave. I negotiated the right to walk away with everything we've built. We're protected. You're sure about this? I'm sure that Elena Voss has kept every promise she's ever made to me. I'm sure that she values the same things we do. And I'm sure that we can do more good as part of something bigger than we can alone. He paused. But I'm also sure that if I'm wrong, we have an exit strategy. So yes, I'm sure enough to try. The expansion happened gradually. Brooks Analytical became the institutional oversight division of Voss Innovations. They moved to better office space within the Voss building, hired 6 more analysts, developed partnerships with regulatory agencies who wanted independent verification of investment strategies. Within a year, they were reviewing billions in institutional investments, preventing fraud before it happened, saving investors from the kind of catastrophic losses that destroyed retirement accounts and pension funds. The work was good, important. Exactly what Liam had wanted to build, but bigger, with more impact, reaching more people. And he was still home for dinner 4 nights a week. Still went to Jake's basketball games. Still helped Sophie with college applications. Still took Emma to the aquarium to stare at octopuses. 3 years after the Fairmont presentation, Sophie graduated high school. She'd gotten into MIT with a full academic scholarship, planned to study engineering, wanted to build things that mattered. The night before she left for college, she found Liam in his office doing the work he always did when he was anxious, reviewing numbers that didn't need reviewing. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine, just processing." "Processing that your daughter is leaving?" "Something like that." Sophie sat down across from him. "You know what I remember most about the last few years?" "What?" "You being there. Not just physically there. Actually there. Present. Paying attention. Being a dad instead of just someone who lived in the same house and paid the bills. I wasn't always good at it." "No, but you got better. You chose to get better. That's what matters." She leaned back. "You know what else I remember?" "Tell me." "That conversation we had about Mom, about scared and wrong being different things. You told me later that you'd forgotten she said that I reminded you." "I remember. I think about that a lot, about how easy it is to forget the important things when you're busy being scared. But you didn't forget. Not really. You just needed someone to remind you." Sophie smiled. "I'm proud of you, Dad, for building something that matters, for being brave enough to tell the truth when it cost you everything, for remembering what's actually important." Liam felt something break open in his chest. "I'm proud of you too, for being smarter than me, for holding me accountable, for being exactly who you are. I learned from the best. Your mom would have loved seeing who you became. I think she does see, somehow, and I think she's proud of both of us." They sat there for a while, not talking, just being present in the moment before everything changed again. The next day, Liam drove Sophie to MIT, helped her move into her dorm, met a roommate who seemed nice enough, tried not to cry when he said goodbye, failed at that last part. On the drive home, he called Elena. "How'd it go?" she asked. "She's incredible, and I'm a mess." That's parenthood, being proud and heartbroken at the same time. "Yeah," Liam merged onto the highway. "Thank you, by the way." "For what?" "For that conversation in the coffee shop 3 years ago. For asking what I'd build. For giving me the chance to actually build it. For not letting me compromise when I was scared." "You did that yourself. I just provided resources." "You did more than that. You saw me when I was invisible. You challenged me when I was complacent. You believed in something before it existed." Elena was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course. When I started Voss Innovations, I told myself I'd measure success by impact, not by money or growth or market position, by actual impact, whether what I built made things better." She paused. "What you've created, this whole division, the way it's changed how institutions think about investment verification, the fraud you've prevented, that's impact, real impact. And it only exists because you were brave enough to tell the truth at the Fairmont when everyone wanted you to stay quiet. That wasn't bravery. That was desperation. It was both. The best decisions usually are." Liam thought about that, about the night he'd written that first email to Elena, admitting he wouldn't use their connection for business leverage, about the Fairmont presentation where he'd stood up knowing it might destroy everything, about testifying before the SEC when it would have been easier to stay quiet. All of it had been terrifying, all of it had been necessary, all of it had been worth it. 5 years after the Fairmont presentation, Brooks Analytical, now the Institutional Oversight Division, had prevented an estimated $40 billion in fraudulent investments. They'd worked with regulatory agencies to develop new oversight standards. They'd trained hundreds of analysts in ethical decision-making. They'd changed how the industry thought about verification and accountability. And Liam Brooks, who'd spent 9 years being invisible at Helix Capital, was now regularly invited to speak at industry conferences about integrity and financial analysis. He declined most of them. Not because he didn't want to speak, but because speaking engagements happened in the evenings and weekends when he preferred to be with his kids. Jake was 15 now, decent at basketball, still enthusiastic about things he wasn't particularly good at. Emma was 12, had decided marine biology was boring and wanted to be a veterinarian instead. Sophie was finishing her sophomore year at MIT, already doing research that her professors said was graduate-level work. Liam had learned to delegate, to trust his team, to accept that he couldn't do everything and didn't need to try. He worked reasonable hours, took vacations, remembered what it felt like to rest. He'd also learned something more important, that being invisible wasn't the same as being unimportant, that the quiet work of getting things right mattered even when nobody noticed. That integrity wasn't about grand gestures. It was about small decisions made consistently over time. Most people would never know his name. That was fine. His kids knew who he was. His team knew what he'd built. The investors who'd been saved from fraud because of his analysis knew the impact even if they didn't know the person behind it. That was enough. One evening, 7 years after everything started, Liam was at home helping Jake with algebra when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Brooks? This is Daniel Chen from the Senate Banking Committee. We're investigating regulatory gaps in institutional investment oversight. Your name keeps coming up as someone who understands the system and isn't afraid to tell the truth about it. Would you be willing to testify before Congress about needed reforms?" Liam looked at Jake struggling with quadratic equations, at Emma watching a documentary about wolves, at the house that wasn't fancy but was home, at the life he'd built by choosing truth over advancement. "Yes," he said, "I'd be willing to testify." Because that's what this had always been about. Not about being seen or recognized or celebrated, about doing work that mattered, about telling the truth even when it was hard, about building something his kids could be proud of. He testified before Congress 3 months later, spent 4 hours explaining how current oversight structures incentivize the kind of fraud he'd exposed at the Fairmont, proposed reforms that would require independent verification of investment projections, argued for stronger penalties for firms that knowingly misrepresented risk. Some senators listened, others had already made up their minds. A few reforms passed, others died in committee. The system changed incrementally, which was frustrating but realistic. Liam went back to his work, back to his team, back to the quiet business of preventing fraud one analysis at a time. He kept in touch with Rebecca Chen, who'd become the second in command at the division and ran things when Liam was unavailable, with Sarah Kim, who'd developed a risk assessment methodology that was now being taught at business schools, with David Park, who'd finally articulated why he left Goldman. He wanted to sleep at night without wondering if his work had hurt people. He stayed close with Ellen Rodriguez, who transformed from managing relationships at Helix to building an entire client services framework that aligned with their values. She'd been right about wanting to do better. She'd spent 5 years proving it, and he stayed closest with Elena Voss, who'd been Astra all along. They had coffee once a month at the terrible coffee shop in Lincoln Park, talked about business and life and the strange ways people found each other. She never apologized again for the manipulation of those early months. He never asked her to. Some things just were what they were. On the 10-year anniversary of the Fairmont presentation, the Financial Times ran a retrospective piece. They interviewed investors who'd been in that ballroom, regulatory officials who'd investigated the resulting fraud, analysts who'd been inspired by what happened. They interviewed Liam, too, asked him what he'd learned from the experience. "I learned that being invisible isn't the worst thing that can happen to you," he said. "Being invisible while doing important work is fine. Being visible while doing meaningless work is worse. And being visible while doing important work is terrifying but worth it." "Do you have any regrets?" the reporter asked. "About the Fairmont?" "No." "About taking so long to find the courage to speak up?" "Yes." "But that's life. You learn at your own pace. The important thing is learning eventually." What would you tell someone who's in the position you were in 10 years ago? Invisible? Undervalued? Wondering if they should take a risk? Liam thought about that, about the scared analyst who'd written an honest email at midnight, about the father who'd almost chosen security over integrity, about the man who'd been taught his whole life that staying quiet was safer than speaking up. "I'd tell them that scared and wrong are different things," he said finally, "that doing the right thing usually costs you something in the short term, that building something meaningful takes longer than you expect and is harder than you imagine, that nobody's going to hand you the career you want. You have to build it yourself, one honest decision at a time." That's it? That's it. There's no shortcut, no secret, just work that matters and the courage to keep doing it even when it's hard. The article ran with the photo of Liam in his office, surrounded by his team, looking exactly like what he was. Someone who'd chosen truth over comfort and built something worth building. Sophie called him after reading it. "You did good, Dad," she said. "We did good. All of us. Your mom would be proud." "She would. But I'm proud too, for what that's worth. It's worth everything." That night, after Jake's basketball game and Emma's request for stories about octopuses and the usual chaos of evening routine, Liam sat in his office and thought about the path that had brought him here. From invisible analyst to unemployed to building something from scratch. From being kept quiet to speaking truth publicly. From choosing security to choosing integrity and discovering they didn't have to be mutually exclusive. It hadn't been smooth, hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, stretches of fear, periods where he'd questioned every decision. But looking back, he wouldn't change any of it, because this team, this work, this impact, this life, was exactly what he'd been working toward without knowing it. He opened his laptop, pulled up the forum where he and Elena had first connected as anonymous analysts challenging each other's thinking, posted one final message in the thread where it all started. To everyone doing invisible work, fixing other people's mistakes, wondering if anyone notices or cares, they might not notice now. But if you keep doing the right thing, keep pursuing truth, keep refusing to compromise what matters, eventually you'll build something that can't be ignored. Not because you demanded attention, but because what you built was worth seeing. The work matters. The integrity matters. And you matter. Even when you're invisible. Especially when you're invisible. Keep going. He posted it, closed the laptop, went to check on his kids one more time before bed. Emma was already asleep, stuffed animal clutched tight. Jake had fallen asleep reading, which meant carefully removing the book and turning off the light without waking him. Sophie was away at school, her room empty but full of presents. Liam stood in the hallway between their rooms and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness exactly. Life was too complicated for constant happiness. But peace with his choices, with his path, with who he'd become and what he'd built. He'd started invisible, stayed invisible for years, then been forced into visibility whether he wanted it or not, and learned that visibility wasn't the goal, integrity was, impact was, building something that mattered was. The rest was just noise. He went to bed, set his alarm for 6:30 because Jake had early practice and Emma had a field trip, and someone had to make breakfast and pack lunches and be present for all the small moments that added up to a life. Slept well. Woke up ready to do it all again. Because this was what success actually looked like. Not headlines or recognition or people remembering your name. Just work that mattered, kids who knew they were loved, and the quiet satisfaction of having built something worth building. One honest decision at a time.